A couple more small businesses will take
and we were talking about last-minute Christmas presents, and of course the other thing is to go onto the high street and go into those small businesses.
You don't have to buy everything from online retailers.
No, you don't. So obviously you're a Larry lightweight, leaving for Christmas. When are you back?
I'm back in a week's time, so I'll be back on Drive on Monday the 30th.
You lucky chap. Well, I hope you have a brilliant Christmas. I hope the show goes well as well.
Thank you very much indeed. Merry Christmas to you, David.
Thank you, and to you, and thank you very much to all of you for everything this morning. I will be back, actually. No Christmas for me at the moment. I'll be back tomorrow for breakfast from 6. Hope you can join me then. Until then, bye.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. I'm Peter Cardwell, just putting in my earpiece because it fell off. Thank you so much for your company this morning here on Talk. I'm here between now and 1 o'clock. It's my final show before Christmas. I'm heading off the Emerald Isle afterwards, but plenty to discuss before then, including Rachel Reeves stealing 45% of your donations to charity in taxation. We'll get the latest on the German Christmas market attack. And we'll talk about Elon Musk and his fixation with Britain, some are calling it. There's a net zero grocery tax to push up shopping bills by £1.4 billion. We'll talk about that and how that is affecting people. That is a sort of a stealth tax that has come in. And also shoppers splashing £2.8 billion on last-minute gifts on Manic Monday as they scramble to pick up presents and food in the final 2 days before Christmas. We'll talk to Kevin Hollinrake as well. He is the Shadow Housing Secretary for the Conservatives. We did ask to speak to Lucy Powell from Labour, but she hasn't got time this morning. We will hear a little bit from one of our other interviews this morning from her. We had quite a spirited debate yesterday about Sarah Sharif, about this girl, 15 different opportunities missed to save her. The judges can't be named in all those different family court cases because a judge has said that that shouldn't happen. Is that the right thing? And how do we unpack this to make sure it doesn't happen again? But I mean, I just don't have confidence that it will. Marcella Leonard, who is a social worker, will talk to us about that. We'll also talk to Johnny Ball. We'll check in with him. Johnny's been on the show before. He's the host of the Veterans in Politics podcast, and he's got some really interesting ideas around veterans at Christmas, those who have served, keeping us safe both at home and abroad, and also the fact that Afghanistan is very quickly becoming a forgotten conflict. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Christmas travel as well. I will declare an interest in that. I'm heading off. Also, we will discuss our small businesses. Last one of these of the year. We know that small businesses are struggling at the moment, and we've decided to profile a couple of small businesses in every show right up until Christmas, so the final one of those today. What we're also going to do today is check in with 3 or 4 different people who have made a big impression this year in terms of callers. So people who give me a ring, just like you can today on 0344 499 1000. There are quite a few people. We'll be remembering what they have told us over the year, and we will be checking in with them and wishing them, seeing how they've developed, how things have changed for them, and also wishing them a very, very Merry Christmas. One of those, of course, will be Teresa, who we spoke to previously, who was worried about keeping warm this winter, and there was a really overwhelming response to that. We'll be checking in with Teresa. We'll be checking in with Mark in Lincolnshire as well. We spoke to him last week. He said he hadn't received a Christmas card in 3 years. Lots to discuss. Let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can give me a shout on text as well, 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell, and remember, voice notes of less than a minute, if you would. You can send me those on 0344 499 1000. We had some excellent voice notes yesterday, but someone had me on in the background whilst recording the voice note. So not often I say this, but mute me and then record your voice note and then turn the sound up again and send it in via WhatsApp, 0344 499 1000. You can send me a text message via WhatsApp on that number as well, and you can give me a ring as well. We talk to as many people as we can between now and 1 o'clock. As you know, this is my show, but it's your show too, and as the final one before Christmas, I want to make sure I speak to as many people as possible. So let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, Phil in Hertfordshire has been in touch already. He says, good morning, Peter. Regarding the 45% tax rate on the charities, I think it's just an added pressure on the charities because now a lot of them don't take cash. They only take card payments and direct debits. So people are using less cash. The charities are going to suffer anyway. And I don't know why they don't keep taking cash. Well, listen, this is a really interesting one, Phil, because I have been... I'm not sort of saying I'm Mother Teresa or anything, but I've done a few charity collections in my time, and often you're in this. I mean, look, this is in London in my case, in London Bridge Station actually, for a great charity, the Roy Castle Lung Cancer Foundation. I've done a few sort of bucket collections for them, and the number of people who say, I just don't have any cash, I'd like to give you a donation. And there was one bucket collection we did where we had, I think, 1 or 2 card machines, and we did okay, and we're very, very grateful, and every penny helps, of course, and not turning any cash away. But towards the next one we did, all of the sort of 6 or 8 of us had card machines, and we just took in so much more because people are willing, even if it's £1 or £2 or whatever donation they're giving, they're often willing to give a bit more if it is a card donation. Maybe it doesn't quite feel as if you're giving much away. But if you think about it, a lot of people don't carry cash now. I do carry cash myself, but I don't use it that often. So it's an interesting, very, very interesting point, Phil, and it will come into our discussion now with Matthew Goodwin-Freeman and Matthew Torbett, 2 political commentators. I don't quite know who the genius is who had 2 Matthews on the same panel, both with beards. But yeah, Chris the producer, raising his hand there. But nonetheless, thank you to him for having both Matthews in the studio today. Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, maybe you could start with you. You're a Conservative councillor as well, I know. This point on Rachel Reeves, the Grinch Reeves, says the Mail on Sunday, stealing 45% of your donations. This is 45 pence, and every pound donated to charity will now effectively go to the government. National insurance rate adding another 1.4 billion to wage bills. So this analysis by the Mail on Sunday saying that there is so much of this charity cash going. I mean, many people giving money to charities, especially at Christmas, may well feel shortchanged.
Yeah, I mean, this just doesn't feel right for me. I don't know about you, Matthew, but Rachel the Grinch from Accounts at Reeves, I mean, 45 pence in every pound donated to charity will now effectively go to the government. That just doesn't feel right.
What should they do? Because, and I suppose it's the question of where you draw the line as well, because if you look at, for example, let's take something that's maybe less emotive than charity giving, but something like GPs' practices.
Yep.
I mean, they are essentially private businesses, even though they supply services to the NHS. And should they have an exemption from these national insurance contributions from employers, especially when you have GPs who might be earning 120 grand a year?
GPs, hospices, it's been raised so many times in Parliament.
What do you think?
I think hospices, for example, should be exempt. I don't think they should be having these extra charges on them. But it just doesn't, honestly, for me, it doesn't feel right that what this government is doing is taking money from pensioners, taking money from farmers, now taking money from charities. I mean, charities are something where actually, you know, you all go in, you buy an extra mug you don't need for the cupboard and everything like that, and you say, yes, I'll do the gift aid because there's that bit extra money.
Yep.
But if you knew that half of that was going...
Gift aid is a way. I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying I'm Mother Teresa, but I've just given a little bit of money to charity for Christmas, and that is, you know, you tick the gift aid thing, that's what you do, and that gives you some money back. Of course, there are huge pressures on the economy. Rachel Reeves would say that your party, the Conservative Party, actually left them in this situation, and this is what they've had to do.
I'm sure she would, and if she could point to any evidence that there actually was a £22 billion black hole, and if she could point to any evidence that actually giving bumper pay rises to the unions instead of actually fixing the economy, then I'd be happy to have that discussion with her.
Shouldn't she have ended the junior doctor strike? Shouldn't she have ended the ASLEF train workers strike?
More than happy to end a strike as long as you get better services at the end of it, instead of just paying out so that the strike stops. That's the difference between what we were doing as a government and what Labour were doing. We wouldn't stop the strikes if we weren't having better quality services. Labour went, what do you want? OK, fine, here you go.
Matthew Talbot, what do you make of this issue?
Richard Reeves probably would say that, and she'd be right. We can talk about 22 billion black holes, numbers, whatever. Do any of you know anybody that feels better off at the moment than they did 14 years ago?
You can't just frame the well, no, absolutely. No one feels better off now than they did when the election was.
Well, you can frame it as 14 years or indeed the election. That is the question. It's a very pertinent question that Matthew asks in politics. Indeed, Ronald Reagan, very much the hero of many Conservatives, says that as well when he asked the question years ago and said, do you feel better off under the Republicans? Do you feel better off or not? And it's a reasonable question, is it not?
Well, what I would say is, you talk about 14 years. Well, actually, I'm more than happy to say the last few years have been a disaster. We had COVID, we had everything after that, we had the war in Ukraine. I completely get that in those years, people felt worse off. I completely get that. But you can't just blanket the last 14 years,
OK, fine. I mean, you guys were in charge 14 years, but if we want to do the last 3 years, we can look at Liz Truss's...
I wasn't personally in charge.
No. You guys as in Matthew
the Conservatives
or whatever, yeah. I think you can look at the highest tax rate since post-war, cutting the arm...
Which Rachel Reeves has increased.
No, I agree. I don't agree with that, but what I'm saying is decisions have got to be made by governments, and without sounding like some Labour Party apparatchik, you know, these decisions are always going to annoy people. Where I'd have probably differed from the Labour Party, and where I think political choices could be better made, is you could have not done this, you could have not cut the winter fuel allowance, and you could have not done the farmers, and what you could have done, personally, for those that have the most, is you could have put up corporation tax by 2%. That would have brought in £14 billion, and you would have had change to spare despite all of this. I think you would have
still hit businesses, though.
Absolutely, but you're going to hit somebody, unfortunately, because of the gaping hole in the economy.
The whole point that Rachel Reeves wants on how Labour have bet the farm is growth, and 2.5% growth, and you're not going to get 2.5% growth unless you make life easier for businesses big and small.
No, and that's why I was astounded that because interest rates are low, why she's not borrowed to invest. I think you need to use every lever you can, and I found it bizarre that in an election that we were so obviously going to win, even if you'd have probably done the winter fuel, then you'd have still romped home to victory, maybe not with a large enough majority, but you boxed yourself in with what is essentially your bread and butter on things like tax and national insurance. People were probably half expecting taxes to go up just because people are fed up of government and fed up of the country. And with regards to better services, I agree, but that ain't going to happen overnight. That's a long-term strategy because of the state of public services.
And we could have started by now. You know, the thing I will agree with you there is, what I find really frustrating is this was not in the manifesto or in the promises or in the pledges or in the discussions when we were having the general election. And it does feel
we were told everything was costed.
Yeah, well, It does feel like
Until they went into the Treasury, remember?
They won the election on a bunch of promises, and then since day one, it's been, right, here's our completely other mandate and what we're actually going to do. And that's what people are fed up with, and this is another thing.
Hang on a minute. Right. What promises? What did we promise?
You promised that you
promised nothing.
You promised you wouldn't increase national insurance. Then you said, oh well, we will increase it, but for businesses and employers, we won't increase it for everyone. The working people definition I love. The working people definition I love, because by that logic, pensioners, farmers, and charity workers aren't working people.
No, I agree. That's why I thought it was a bizarre comparison to make. But my point is, you're saying things like you went in on a bunch of promises. The only thing I ever saw from the Labour Party during the general election was to promise to not be the Tories.
And then a lot of people are now saying actually they are, if not worse.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. There was no promises, and in fact the manifesto said very little unless you dug into it towards the back pages.
I remember bringing a print out of it here. It's the first time I've ever bothered to print out the Labour manifesto.
That's the whole point of this lack of political strategy. And I saw John Curtis say last week, Labour will not win without a vision. There's no vision, there's no story.
Yeah. Do you feel there's a vision? Do you feel there's a story, Matthew?
I don't know, do you? I have no idea. I think this is the problem. Margaret Thatcher had a vision, she had a story, she had a background. Tony Blair had the same. Gordon Brown had similar, despite not really winning an election. I think without that, without a narrative, you can do all the work. They could get the 2.5% growth. We've just seen in America, you can do all the work on the economy unless people are feeling it, unless you're telling people.
Well, Keir Starmer, I'm sure Matthew Goodwin Freeman would say he's got a plan for change. You know, it's all fine. It's all, like, you know, problems not pain now, but you know, there'll be things will be better later on.
But that's the problem. If you premise every conversation and every speech with things are going to be bad now, but then they're going to get better, and you're going to be, you know, like, if you premise, no, he's done it in every speech as a carbon copy, robotic speech of, you know, I made tough decisions, and this is this. Look, at the end of the day, you have to give people a vision, as we've all said. You have to give people something to hope towards, but you can't say you'll get that in the future, but right now, dipping into the pocket again.
I remember a very senior person in the Conservative government once saying to me that you need, as you say, hope, but also competence. Is there a sense that there's competence in your view as a former, as a person who worked for the Labour Party, not anymore, but Matthew Torbett, do you feel there's competence? Do you feel, you know, as we were told when this election was happening, the adults are back in charge?
That tells you everything.
I think there's some competent people within the Labour Party and the Labour government. I think we are rapidly at risk of, well, we already are seen as a middle-class endeavour, supporting or being part of the Labour Party. I think we've dropped the ball with regards to reform because we've allowed them to be the arbiters of common sense speech, and actually that was what Labour always were. They were a party for the workers, they were a party for people, ordinary people that would have frustrations and hopes and whatever else, and at the moment that isn't the case. Do I think that can be turned around? Yeah, if you bring different people in. I think unfortunately across the political spectrum, can I add, we are surrounded by people that are totally out of touch, totally from all the same background, similar types of people, and without that. And I think we talk a lot about diversity, and I'm a big fan of diversity. I think it can work in many ways. The one element of diversity we never quite touch on, and I think is a massive barrier to getting on, but also to allowing other people to get on if you're advising politicians, is class.
Yeah,
totally and utterly social class.
Yeah.
And without that, we have, within number 10, and I don't hold it against people being privately educated, but you're only getting one understanding of life. You're privately educated, come from a wealthy background, white and male, and without that...
Angela Rayner's none of those things. She's Deputy Prime Minister.
She's not in number 10. I'm on about number 10 specifically, and if the message is coming from the top down, where you have a Prime Minister who was also very middle class but masquerades as a working class champion,
was his father a toolmaker? Sorry, I missed that.
Can we just check that, please?
I think he owned the tool shop. But,
he made a very big tool, I can tell you that.
I think there has to be drastic change of the people in and around you, and if you put your trust in the people...
Do you think he's going to survive?
I gave him 2 years on election night. I think the 2026 locals, along with Wales and Scotland, which we will lose both of. And I hate being this sort of doom and gloom disaster merchant. It's the way I see it. I speak to people back home. I speak to people all over. No, but everybody hates the government.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing. We're so short into this
Well, the question we're asking today is, who is your Christmas political Grinch? Who do you think is the one that should be spoken about? Who is the political Grinch of Christmas? I see that the producers there have helpfully just added a picture of Rachel Reeves there, so we wouldn't like to influence your mind in any way. It could have been me. That is true, as Tuck Up Dave says in my ear. 0344 499 1000 is the number. It's Kelvin and Sue in Macclesfield say, "Morning, Peter. Rachel Thieves is my political Grinch, just living up to her name, Thief. The Mafia are worried because she's the mother of all mothers. The black hole is part of the big black hole they left the last time they were in power. Remember the note, there's no money left. These liars have short memory. She has no clue about running a chip shop, never mind the country. Merry Christmas and have a good holiday back home," says Kelvin. Well, thank you, Kelvin. Merry Christmas to you and Sue as well. Tony says, "Merry Christmas to you and everyone at Talk. This government has made a series of catastrophic decisions that are hurting voters, yet they don't even care." Stuart says, "Sorry to give bad news to your listeners just before Christmas, but Rachel from accounts will have to raise taxes again. Labour's manifesto is based upon 2.5% growth, which will not happen." I mean, all the forecasts say that won't happen. They could, of course, be wrong. Keir Starmer essentially hoping it will happen, but we'll see. Labour's manifesto was based upon 2.5% growth, which will not happen. Rachel and Starmer will lie and blame the tax U-turn on something else, but the root cause will be this Labour government, says Stuart. Will Reeves now reduce foreign aid by 45%, says Mick in Wallington. And thank you to Claire, who says, "What a Merry Christmas message from Rachel Reeves, so she's taking 45% of charity donations and tax. Is this to prop up the illegal migrant hotels and housing charitable causes? Disgusting, disgraceful, and to be honest, the money will run out just like a skewered bucket." There's a lovely little poem that Simon has sent me. I'm going to read it at the end of the programme, Simon, but do stay in touch. Do stay listening for that. It would be perhaps more appropriate just at the end rather than when we're talking about who we think the political Grinch of Christmas is. We're going to talk in a second a little bit more about Germany and what has happened, what more we know now, 24 hours on or further than that, more like 36 hours on, and also Elon Musk's fixation with Britain and the fact that the Observer newspaper is saying that actually we could be in a situation where legislation is brought in to stop him giving money to Reform UK. What do you think about that? 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Got a Secret Santa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. And what do you? And are you one of?
I've bought for the siblings, bought for the parents.
How many siblings?
I've got 2 siblings, but not here to show off. But if I can make one semi-serious point for a moment,
yes.
online culture for shopping is great and Amazon is wonderful, but let's remember our small businesses.
I agree.
Which are struggling this Christmas. Where I come from, down in Honiton, Sidmouth, we have amazing small businesses in East Devon, and if you've got the opportunity to go out
politician.
and buy something from a local shop,
honestly, you're speaking
it's a
like
great
a politician.
opportunity.
No, I
I
totally
speak
agree.
like an ordinary person, David, that wants our small business to see out this Labour government.
I totally agree.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Jackie's been in touch on text 87222 with the word talk in her text. Good morning, Peter. Not content with freezing people, making them poorer, making them less free, less safe, and changing our culture and demographics, they now want to starve us for packaging. This government is out of control. We need protection from the King to dissolve this Parliament and for another election for the harm they're causing the public, says Jackie. We'll talk about that story in a second about packaging and the fact that the net zero grocery tax could push up shopping bills by £1.4 billion. Leslie says, could Matthew please advise us who in the Cabinet is competent? Go ahead, Matthew Torbett.
Competent, but some of the two of the advisors to Ed Miliband are two of the cleverest people I've ever met, not just on green stuff but on across all measures, and actually come from fairly normal backgrounds, so that's why I'm also a big fan of them. I think Lou Hague was actually quite competent, other than sort of not declaring obvious interests. I think she already got a lot of stuff done with regards to rail nationalisation. I would say, oh God, now you're pushing me, actually. No, I'll tell you who, he doesn't attend Cabinet, but James Timpson gives me a lot of hope on things I'm interested in, like prison reform. Yeah, 1,000,000%. I think he will be, and actually, it's going to be a tough task to try and get the 1.5 million homes done. I don't think it will happen. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a target, but I think Matt Pennycook is the brains behind the whole operation.
The Housing Minister.
Yeah, it's not... Angela's not always great across the detail, I must admit, but Matt Pennycook is a very bright man. Okay. None of which attend Cabinet, I don't think. I've just or not anymore.
You've talked about some ministers. We're actually going to talk about those housing targets with the Shadow Housing Secretary, Kevin Hollinrake, who will be with us a little bit later on this hour, actually. So stay tuned for that. And on Ed Miliband, Dan and Kent, I think, would perhaps disagree with you. Probably. And says my political Grinch of the year is Ed Miliband, because if we follow his net zero madness, we'll all be back living in caves. Well, let's actually talk about that story. Front page of the Sunday Telegraph, the net zero grocery tax to push up food bills. This is a new grocery tax designed to achieve the government's net zero targets, pushing up household shopping bills by £1.4 billion a year. Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, what do you make of this?
It's more stealth taxes, isn't it? You know, they promised that there'd be £300 off energy bills. They're not. They're going up. You know, this is now £56 extra on yearly household costs. I mean, I know we're talking about small amounts, but they all add up, and this is the problem. Every little thing is going up now, and that's adding to people's overall costs in a massive, massive way. And you don't notice it. You don't notice if your coffee goes up from £2.50 to £2.75. You don't notice that. But then over the whole year, if that's happening to everything, that's the problem. So, yeah, bills are going up because... yeah, we've got some more green levies.
And this is a particular levy that will see retailers and manufacturers charge per tonne of packaging of materials they use. It's aimed at helping the UK reduce waste and meet its net zero targets. Matthew Torbett, is this a good idea, bad idea? What do you think?
I think ultimately, I always think with green stuff, which isn't my expertise, you have to encourage people to get involved. I remember when Sadiq was bringing in the ULEZ, I thought the only way that you can make this work is you have to offer quite a generous scrappage scheme, because not everybody can afford a brand new green vehicle and whatever else. You need to give them enough time and offer them enough money to be able to do that. I think with this, I mean, it works out £2 a week. I think if we are to combat climate change, man-made climate change, which appears to be a reality, then £2 a week is probably not a bad charge. But
it's not the only charge, is the point. I mean, net zero is going to cost an awful lot of money, and also I'm all for doing our bit. I recycle. I try to do something, I suppose. I do believe man-made climate change is a thing. I think the evidence is there. Not every presenter and not every viewer and listener agrees with me on that, and that's okay. But Matthew Goodwin Freeman, all of this is just mounting up, and it's charging the hard-pressed taxpayer and people doing their shopping with yet another, effectively, a stealth tax, as you say.
And also, as we keep taxing ourselves to go and become green and climate clean, China opens a new coal-powered factory every single month. We are 1% of the world's CO2 emissions. So if we really think that our 1% change is going to make that much of a difference overall, then I don't understand it. We're all going to have to pay extra in our bills to make such a little difference on the global stage. We should be going out and saying, right, China, you need to be stopping these coal-powered plants.
They're going to listen?
More. They might not listen, but that's the sort of attitude we need to be setting on the world stage. That's the sort of direction we need to go. Actually go after the polluters, not after the British public.
But the thing is, I hate that sort of attitude.
Well, why?
We can... Well, they're not doing it, so we might as well not bother. Well, we might as well all give up tomorrow. No, we might as well all give up tomorrow. But
the point is, I see where you're coming from, Matthew Torbett, but the point is it not? If we're doing this and changing the entire nature of the economy, I'm not talking about a £2 charge every week. I'm talking about net zero changing the entire nature of our economy, and other countries just don't do it. Yeah. Well, what's the point, really?
I'm done.
Well, I believe in doing the right thing for one, and if China don't want to come with us,
even if it cripples you economically.
No, I think...
Well,
is it going to? Is it going to? That's going to bear fruit.
It is.
No, I don't think it will.
Let's let him speak, because we're both against him. 2 against 1.
Yeah, well, I'm used to it. It's fine. But I think that... But China do have to come with us. And as I've said, you have to encourage people to come with you. If you can't encourage them, you tax them.
Xi Jinping is not sitting in Beijing going, well, Ed Millwell's got a great idea. I'm going to follow that one.
No, but you don't have to encourage them. You get Donald Trump involved. You start putting tariffs up.
Donald Trump is not going to...
No, he won't, but you've got to work with allies to make sure they do. And I think ultimately if they don't, well, then we all go to hell in a handcart anyway, don't they? But I'd rather think we try to do something about it rather than just allowing it... We might as well give up tomorrow if that's the attitude we're going to have.
The point is that we are all going to have higher bills to do stuff which is going to be undone in moments by the rest of the planet. That's the problem. You can lead as much as you want, but as you said, you've got to bring other people with you. And if other people are saying, no, we're not coming with you, then you're literally cutting off... I genuinely don't understand
I have a lot of sympathy with that point, and I would struggle to find an argument. The moral question I have is, what would be the point in us doing anything then? What if everybody had that attitude, we'd get nowhere, and I feel like we have to do something.
I don't think it's... my issue in this is it's not about doing nothing. It's not about not trying to help. It's resetting the whole economy. It's changing the way we do everything very, very rapidly. Things like electric cars, for example, I think we've moved really quickly on that. I think we've moved too quickly. I think the technology will catch up. I mean, you don't buy the prototype, you wait till version 5 or 6, and we've bought in the prototype. We're putting loads of money into it, and to me, that is a waste of time and money. And essentially, you're saying to car manufacturers, for example, we've got the lowest number of cars bought in this country, I think, certainly since the 70s. I remember seeing something yesterday that's off the top of my head, I'm afraid. And you're in a situation where you're forcing people to go green when actually that could be even more expensive for them in the longer term.
And I'd agree with you in the sense of there needs to be a balanced economy of energy. I think you do have to take time with this sort of stuff. You cannot drag your own public with you. If you want to get other countries involved, that's, you've got to try and do what you can. I think also the frustration is you look at things like COP. One of my old bosses has been going for 30 years. It's just mouth service now, lip service. What's the point?
Yeah, 470 civil servants went there as well. Mick has been in touch and says, everything I bought in the supermarket yesterday has doubled in price since Labour won the election. That is a fact, he says. Fiona says the Labour Party are clearly biting off the hand that feeds you. Hopefully the people will support the farmers, pensioners and each other while the government supports others. And we're asking the question today, who is your political Grinch this year? Who do you think is the person, the politician who is the political Grinch? Let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. I promise you we'll talk about Germany, we'll talk about Elon Musk, and we will talk about Manic Monday, which is the last minute Christmas gifts. Let us know your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000, and we'll get more from the Matthews in a moment.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, we're getting more detail out of Germany in terms of what happened at the Christmas market attack yesterday. We've also had comments from Lord Darroch, the former British ambassador to the United States, has talked about what Peter Mandelson becoming the ambassador to the United States from Britain. We'll talk more about that in a second. He said life under Trump 2.0 is going to be like a 24/7 barroom brawl. He said that on Sky News. We'll get you some thoughts on that from the Matthews in a minute. But for the meantime, I just want to talk about what we know in regard to Germany that we didn't know yesterday. We're getting a lot more information out of this, and Saudi Arabia repeatedly warning Germany about the suspect's extremist views before the Christmas market attack. Horrendous attack. The death toll has now gone up to 5. Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, your reaction to this?
I was doing an interview yesterday and we were talking about the attack, and just all of us were absolutely speechless. This is not what you want days before Christmas.
Or at any time of the year.
Well, of course. The really sad thing is, and it's horrible to say, this wasn't actually unexpected. We'd had all the talk and narrative for months and months about hyped up security, threats at Christmas, things like that. It's really, really horrific, and I can't help but think about those families, and especially the 9-year-old boy's family, who were preparing for Christmas, have probably bought loads of Christmas presents already that are now never going to get given. It's so, so horrible.
Matthew Trowbridge, could this have been prevented, do you think?
Don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Quite possibly. It always seems to be the case with lots of these attacks, both in this country and elsewhere, where somebody slipped through the net. They may have been on a watch list somewhere, but they've not followed them. Or I think I read this morning in the Telegraph there was a bollard missing, therefore he could get through.
There was a report I read saying that he'd got in through a sort of service entrance where there weren't bollards. He'd come in through a different entrance as well. It's hard to know.
If people exactly are so adamant they're going to do this,
they'll find a way.
They'll find a way. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a question we all face. You know, certainly in this country, 67% of MI5's caseload is Islamic fundamentalist terrorism. 22%, I think it is, or 22% is far-right terrorism. This guy sort of weirdly, from the reports reading, almost overlaps a little bit of both. And I think it speaks to the wider question of what do we do about conspiracies and stuff like that, and how politicians have to get better at rebutting conspiracies. And maybe in the case of, you look at Labour more recently and the Tories in the past, and all stripes of politicians, if you do one thing and say the other, people will lose all trust and respect for you and won't believe you when it really matters. So there's a whole load of questions. I think also there's potentially questions for, I know we're going to speak about him soon, but Elon Musk to answer, another social media giant, when this man apparently was basically declaring what he was going to do online and in tweets. How are we looking at this sort of stuff?
Well, surely that's up to the German authorities to... I mean, they were told about it. They were told about it by Saudi Arabia, what kind of person he was and what he wanted to do.
And also there's questions for them to answer as well. I think it also isn't helpful when we have elected officials from all different types of countries positively salivating as soon as it's happened, hoping it was a certain type of terrorism because it may advance their cause politically. But
also, it goes back to your original point as well. We don't actually know what his motivations were.
No, quite.
Because we've had a very, very confused picture, where people are assuming, a lot of people are assuming that his retweets, his tweets and so on were honest and were straightforward. Perhaps they were creating an impression of something. We just don't know.
And also, it's just been a blur since. I mean, I've read that he came over to Germany and converted to Anglicanism. I've heard that he did an interview for the BBC in Germany a couple of years ago. Like, all these sorts of things. We don't know what the facts are, and that's why people should never rush to conclusions.
Quite.
But, as you've just said, 66% of terror cases that we're dealing with are from Islam, 22% far right. That naturally leads people's
and his background would lead to speculation as well. It's a really interesting one. We're not going to get to the bottom of it today, but certainly more information. We'll talk about this a little bit later in the programme as well. We are, I should say, a few minutes away from talking to the Shadow Housing Secretary as well, Kevin Hollinrake. Just these comments that Kim Darroch has made, the former British ambassador to the US, Lord Darroch, Kim Darroch, has said, life after Donald Trump's return to the White House will be like a 24/7 barroom brawl. This is after comments by an advisor, a campaign manager actually for Donald Trump, said that Lord Mandelson was, as he puts it, an absolute moron. So Lord Darroch has said this is what life is going to be like under Trump 2.0, like a 24/7 barroom brawl. You'll get this sort of stuff going on all the time. You need to have a thick skin and you need to manage it and to get through it, to weather it, as it were. So Lord Mandelson is a very experienced politician. I'm sure he can cope with that kind of stuff.
He's got experience in different... I'm no fan of him, but he's obviously got a decent level of experience. It feels a little bit job for
What
the
is
boys.
it about the Prince of Darkness you don't like?
Yeah, less said the better, I think. I don't need to be going into that. But I think, regardless of what people think, and it's really useful for Kim Darroch to be wading in as ever about Donald Trump, and we get he's not a fan of him, we're going to have to work with him because it will only benefit us. And ultimately, people on the left, people on the more sort of centre-left or whatever else have to understand that Donald Trump has built the most diverse voting coalition in any of our lifetimes. And until politicians appreciate that you can't just go around calling people racist, because that may well be factored in. The fact that people know this stuff and they still didn't trust you, what does that say about you? Or do they not see him as racist? The fact it's going to be a barroom brawl. Maybe people like that idea because establishment politics has been all over
the best one I heard was people saying, oh, people can't vote for Donald Trump. It'll be so much different to how Washington operates at the moment. It's like, that's kind of the point. That's the point. They don't want it to be that way. And we're talking about Elon Musk as well. He, of course, is talking about perhaps giving a large amount of money to Reform UK, and indeed the Observer reporting to that ministers are resisting demands to rush through measures to block this. He could, of course, give it from his UK business and give it as a UK donation. Are you relaxed about Elon Musk giving perhaps a game-changing amount of money to what, for you, a rival party, Matthew?
Well, the point would be that people can make donations to political parties however they want. It's interesting to see that when it's going to a non-mainstream party, how quickly people jump to say, right, we've got to close this loophole, we've got to close this, we've got to close that. If it was money going to them, I'm sure they wouldn't mind. But no, I think, look, we're in this really interesting time. We're talking about Trump, talking about Elon Musk. We are entering an incredible next 4 years where popcorn is going to sell out quickly because it's going to be so presidential, so explosive. He's got full control over America, and Musk, obviously, full control of the world's greatest social media site, which we all love, which is X.
Sounds as if you're getting your love of Elon in early. Matthew, what do you make of the donations aspect of this?
It makes me feel uneasy because I would be the same if I hate doing this, but imagine the headlines if some, billionaire in Cuba decided Keir Starmer was the best route to socialism and wanted to give him billions of pounds.
Well, there have been a lot of worries about Russian, Chinese interference in the election, but Americans are okay, apparently.
I think foreign money in our politics is a very slippery slope to be on, and I think I would make a direct plea to Elon Musk if he wants to make a difference because he loves the UK. It'll cost him 20 billion quid to solve UK homelessness in this country, and we would be a much better country for it. But our GDP and growth would go through the roof, no doubt, and it would make a lasting impact. And I think that's the only thing. It's not the only thing I have an issue with Elon Musk about. Years and years ago, we had proper businessman philanthropists. You look back at Cadbury, you look back at Rowntree, you look back at the Lever family and those that own Clark Shoes. They would build model villages for their workers because they understood you treat your workers right, they're more productive and your business is better all round. We seem to be now in an era where people try and shaft each other left, right and centre, whether it be Jeff Bezos, your Elon Musk, poor working practices, no right to a trade union, people not being allowed to go to the toilet, etc. And he'd rather put his money into divisive political, not parties, but systems in a sense, Trump and it's a very divided political world when actually you could put so much good into the world and end loads of stuff. It says more about the people that we're promoting.
Well, he is putting billions and billions into solving the EV issue and leading the way with the electric cars, which comes back to our early conversation of, well, that's the moral argument he should be doing that.
It makes him money.
No, the point is that he is leading something that you're supporting. He's leading something that you're saying we need to be ramping up and getting more electric vehicles and more electric cars. So, this is my point. It's absolutely fine when it's you. When it's not you, let's close the loopholes. I just don't agree with that.
No, I didn't like it when there was people with links to Russia donating to the Conservative Party. I don't like any of it. This is not because it's because of reform. I do not like the idea of foreign money polluting our politics. Same with China, same with other things.
OK, we'll continue the debate in just a second. But first of all, I just want to hear from Nick in Loughborough. He says a voice note. You can do this. It's dead easy. Do it through WhatsApp, 0344 499 1000. Don't forget to turn the telly or the radio down before before you do. So unfortunately we had to abandon a couple of voice notes yesterday because there was just a very loud me and then the person shouting into their phone as well. So please do mute me momentarily as you send your voice note. And this is what Nick in Loughborough has to say.
Matthew Talbot, I have to say, for the first time I've ever listened to a Labour commentator, this chap has just impressed me. He has the humility to state where Labour are going wrong. And I have to find myself in a position where I agree with a lot of what he said. Well done, Matthew. Well done. Happy Christmas to you all.
Wow, that's nice. Well, thank you to Nick in Loughborough for that. There you are. A bit of praise for you. Matthew Talbot, none for you. Matthew Goodwin Freeman.
No need to.
So far. But,
Thank you.
No need to.
The night is yet young.
Say it as it is.
Thanks to Chris in Brighton as well. He says, my political Grinch of the year is Joe Biden. His relentless warmongering in Ukraine has suppressed Europe's economy, safety, and is driving us to World War III. All for the benefit of the US dollar. Happy Christmas, says Chris in Brighton. Well, we're going to keep the Matthews where they are, and I'm going to talk to Kevin Hollinrake, the Shadow Housing Secretary, in just a second. Matthew Talbot there was talking about homelessness. That will come up in the discussion, as will plenty of other things, including China, including Elon Musk, and so on. So we will do that after the break and then get the Matthews reaction, and indeed yours, on 0344 499 1000, as well as to the question, who is the political Grinch of Christmas? Let us know.
But you get a 30-day trial if you haven't had one before. So just do the 30-day trial, get it all and cancel it if you don't want it. There you go, that's your first tip.
We like that. Right, okay, where should we start?
Moving on, so we've got a Bluetooth speaker from Soundcore. It's Soundcore Anchor. It's called the Motion Boom Plus. Think Ghetto Blaster, right? You can see it up on the screen. So it's like a retro Ghetto Blaster, but it doesn't actually have a source of music in it. Obviously, no cassette or CD or anything in there.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Sean is in Gloucester and says, so they want to stop Elon Musk donating to reform and cancel local elections where there's a strong chance reform will win. No further proof needed that the establishment are sensing their own demise and that the gravy train is coming to a halt, says Sean. Both Labour and the Tories are finished. They've taken the public for a ride for far too long. Lies and false promises always catch up in the end, says Sean in Gloucester. Well, let's find out if the Shadow Housing Secretary thinks the Conservatives are finished. My instinct is that he will not. His name is Kevin Hollinrake. He is the Shadow Housing Secretary. And before we start this interview, I just have to be absolutely clear that I am a director of a non-executive director of a housing company. It's called Home REIT, and I just want to be absolutely clear on that. If I ask any questions about housing, conflict of interest, just be really clear about that. Kevin, you're very welcome this morning. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. We heard from our commentator there a minute ago, Matthew Torbett, saying that we should be encouraging Elon Musk to give money to end homelessness rather than to give it to Reform UK. What do you think about this row about whether there should be preventative measures to stop foreign donations? Are you relaxed about it, or is it something that you worry about?
Yeah, I'm pretty relaxed about it. I mean, there are rules in place in terms of foreign donors. But if there's a UK company involved, then it's deemed appropriate that money can be donated to a political party. So clearly that's a decision for those people whose money it is. Personally, I think there are more important things in politics than money. I think the most important thing that people will make a decision on who they choose to vote for is the leadership qualities of the person who is leading their party. And that's why I think Kemi Badenoch is the right person to lead our party, because she's a bold, optimistic, inspirational person who speaks her mind, and I think has the right kind of conservative values.
Has she made much of an impression so far, Kevin? Because a lot of people think that perhaps Nigel Farage is the leading opposition politician. Many Americans, and perhaps the Trump administration, thinks that as well.
Well, look, I mean, you talked about local elections earlier. Look at the local election results we've had since the general election. You've seen Labour in free fall. They lost 27 seats. We have gained 24 seats. And many of those seats when we fought against Reform. I think Reform have got 7 seats, Lib Dems 1, or gained 1. So clearly we're coming out on top in many of those battles when people are out there, our activists are out there on the streets making the case, as they've done in Dudley, as they've done in Fylde, as they've done in Stock in Essex. We've been winning those battles. So I think people can see that with the right alternative, obviously they don't like this current government, it's who's going to replace them in 2029. I think
and before that as well, Kevin, because Sean in Gloucester there in his message that I was reading out just before you came on, is concerned perhaps some of the local elections will be cancelled in some way because of these moves from local authorities to kind of unitary authorities, as well as Shadow Housing Secretary or Shadow Local Government Secretary. Are you worried about that in terms of people having a say at the ballot box?
Well, always. I mean, people deserve their say. And I'm worried about the plans generally in terms of scrapping local councils. I mean, effectively, Labour government have come in, having not said they would do this, and they're going to scrap every district council, every county council in England. And they're going to make that happen. They're going to force that upon local areas. I think that's the wrong thing to do.
They would argue that actually it gives more local democracy and it puts more power and gives greater powers to those areas.
Well, if that's the case, then local people should be able to decide to take that alternative, and as we let people do. But why should it be the case that central government understands the needs and wishes of local residents better than local councillors do?
Well, when it comes to something like housing, which is also part of your brief as well, I mean, Labour say they want to build 1.5 million homes, and you know as well as I do, not just through your time as and your role as a local MP, that often there are these NIMBYs, there are people who say they don't want homes being built, but actually, especially in the southeast of England, we do need to build a load of homes. I mean, Labour's ambition is there for 1.5 million homes. Do you support that?
Yes, I do, actually. I have no problem with building more homes. We had a similar pledge in our manifesto. And if you look over the last 10 years, our rate of delivery on average over this 10 years was the highest for 50 years. So, yes, we believe in building more homes. I have some concerns about removing powers that local councillors currently have to object to applications. They're going to remove those rights from many councillors, which I think many local residents will be surprised about. I'm also very concerned about the shift from houses being delivered in London, in Nottingham, in Newcastle, in Birmingham, all of which have had their targets cut for housing. But many of those houses then put in lots of rural areas around the country. I think if you look at all this, if you connect the dots in terms of what Labour is doing, the family farms tax, in terms of the scrapping of something called the Rural Services Delivery Grant, which gives much needed funding for rural areas, in terms of plonking all the houses in rural areas, in Greenbelt and Greenfield.
So the Conservatives wouldn't scrap that? They wouldn't scrap that? They keep it as it is?
Wouldn't scrap what, sorry?
What you're talking about there, the services charge?
Rural Services Delivery Grant, is something we implemented. It's hugely important for rural areas.
Okay.
So you can deliver services into rural areas.
You've been talking about various aspects of the economy there. Lucy Powell is the leader of the House of Commons, Labour Cabinet Minister. This is what she's been saying. She spoke to Sky News a little bit earlier this morning.
Obviously, it's disappointing, these figures. Of course, we want to see these things happening faster. We want to see more growth in the economy, and we want to see that faster, but really so that it can be felt by ordinary people around the country. But this is a bit like turning around some huge oil tanker, and the underlying problems that the country faces, which are unprecedented and huge, which is why people voted for change, because they could see, quite honestly, going into that election, the country was going down the Swanee. We had living standards falling for the first time in our history going into that general election. We've had public services, particularly health and education, absolutely on their needs, in dire state of investment. And coming into government, we've had to really take some very difficult decisions. The inheritance and the public finances were even worse than we thought. We've had to take some difficult decisions.
If you don't mind.
But we are starting to turn that oil tanker around.
Lucy Powell there, Labour Cabinet Minister, talking about as she puts it, the dire economic state that the Conservatives left. Do you agree with her, Kevin Hollinrake?
I turned the oil tank around. The oil tanker was already turned around. What they've done is sunk the bloody thing. I mean, it's Christ almighty. I mean, our economy is the fastest growing economy in the world's, in the G7, which is the world's biggest economies. And that was the first 6 months of the year. Since when the Labour, through all the gloom and doom, if you heard it again there from Lucy Powell, all the gloom and doom, and then massive tax increases and massive public spending, £70 billion of increase in public spending, £40 billion of which are tax increases, and then tying the whole economy up in red tape and talking the economy down, and the economy runs on confidence, are the reasons why that supertanker is now come to a grinding halt. I mean, it is just unbelievable that they would try and blame all the mistakes they've made on somebody else. They've made the mistakes. Not a single one of them in the cabinet has any business experience whatsoever. So they've never started and grown a business, and yet they've come in and they've whacked businesses with a huge amount of taxation, and then following that up with a huge amount of red tape, particularly in terms of the Employment Rights Bill, and giving trade unions a huge amount of powers, restoring those powers back to where they were in the 1970s, and then expect the economy to keep growing on, or somehow pointing the finger at blame at us, even though they're the ones that have massively damaged it.
Just turning to 2025, there'll be many challenges politically for your party, for other parties as well. We will also have Donald Trump becoming President of the United States again. The former ambassador, Lord Darroch, Kim Darroch, has said, this is what life is going to be like under Trump 2.0, like a 24/7 barroom brawl. He was reacting to the fact that one of Trump's advisors had called Peter Mandelson an absolute moron. Kim Darroch continued, you get this sort of stuff going on all of the time. You need to have a thick skin and you need to manage it and to get through it, to weather it, as it were. So Lord Mandelson is a very experienced politician. I'm sure he can cope with that kind of stuff. Do you believe Peter Mandelson is an absolute moron?
Well, it's not the words I'd have chosen, but I'm worried about the fact that Peter Mandelson is more interested in a relationship with the EU than he is with the US. And he was somebody who was very keen to remain in the European Union and has been mourned at our departure. So, and we've got to look past that. Most people have moved on from that. And so somebody who can go to the US and strike a deal that's going to make it easier for UK businesses to do business in the US and other parts of the world are the most important things right now for our economy. So we need to be very US leading in terms of our approach. If you get too close to the EU, as I fear Keir Starmer will do, that will rule out a trade deal with the US, and that cannot be a good thing.
Just in about 20 seconds, Kevin, what are your hopes for 2025? What are your Christmas wishes?
Well, I really hope Labour will get their act together, because that's in the interests of every person who's listening or watching your show today. You know, I think it's going to be so important that the next year brings some better news. But I think it'll take a massive reversal of the current approach from Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner for that to happen. So that's what I wish for. I'm a hopeful. I'm not too hopeful right now.
Well, a Merry Christmas to you nonetheless. Thank you, Kevin Hollinrake, Shadow Housing Secretary. We'll get reaction from the Matthews and from you in just a minute here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. It's just gone 11 o'clock, and that was quite an interesting encounter with Kevin Hollinrake, the Shadow Housing Secretary, and the Matthews are still with me, Torbett and indeed Goodwin Freeman. Matthew Torbett, what did you make of what Kevin Hollinrake, the Shadow Housing Secretary, was saying there?
He provided some humorous lines. He seemed keen to stress that they are all behind Kemi Badenoch despite certain murmurs. I think it's too early to tell with Kemi. I do think, though, it's very early days. There's very little sort of policy formulation that can come forward, and there's, in a way, very little to say. But I do think it's the sort of stuff where people are fed up of establishment politics, because you have Lucy Powell on one hand in one clip going, well, you know, we're trying our best, but they made a mess of it and all the rest of it. And then you've got Kevin Hollinrake going, well, actually, they're making a mess of it now, and there's no real solution of well, what we do differently, or Labour even going, what we're doing differently from the Conservatives is, which is why I think people get fed up and look at alternatives, really. But, yeah, you know, he's said a lot without saying a lot, really.
What do you think, Matthew Goodwin-Freeman?
No, I thought the big point was the fact that actually he held Labour up on their comment about, you know, the economy going down the Swanee, because before the election, growth was up, debt was down, inflation was down from 11%, taxes were being cut, things were getting better. And then for Lucy Powell to say that actually, you know, things were getting worse, it's just not true. It's just a lie. And what we've got to do is we've got to call those out, regardless of side, regardless of colour. We've got to call out what the lies are, and that is a lie. But, you know, I thought it was a good interview. I really was interested by what he was saying about the taking power away from local councils. As a local councillor, that's something that I'm really, really, really keen on watching closely.
What could happen in your area?
So luckily for us, we're a London borough, so we're fine. But just the border from where I am in my ward, just the border from us is a council that's looking at getting got rid of.
Okay.
And that would mean local people there have no say on what's happening in their area, have no say on the planning permissions that are going through, the map plans to build all over the fields in our you know, in and around where we are. I can't believe that the party of devolution is now so anti-devolution. We'll see.
Okay.
You can.
It's interesting. Why can you believe that?
I said it. There was a candidate I was helping during the election who's now an MP. And he said he was really excited by what Labour were bringing forward. There was going to be a take-back control bill, and it was going to be the biggest giveaway to local authorities there's ever been. We were going to devolve all sorts of things. And I said, what happened? He said, no, it will. You have to. I said, no. Why do you think a party who's been out of power for 14 years is just going to gift a load of that away to local authorities? I said it will never happen. In fact, the opposite will happen. So it doesn't surprise me that it has happened.
Well, we'll keep a close eye on all of that. Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, Matthew Torbett, thank you both very much. Merry Christmas to you, and thank you for staying on a little bit longer as well today to react to Kevin Hollinrake, who was just there. Let's hear a voice note from Anna, who is in Surrey. She has reaction to what the Matthews have been saying, and indeed the government, as we asked the question about who you think the political Grinch of Christmas is. You can let me know on 0344 499 1000, either by giving me a ring or indeed by sending a voice note like Anna did. This is what Anna in Surrey has to say.
Morning, Peter. I would love to call you right now, but I'm at work. I am listening to these two clowns trying to defend their individual parties. Let me tell you something, gentlemen. I had 14 years of austerity under the Tories, and now I'm having even worse under Labour. Let me tell you what you both have in common. You are not doing what the British people have asked you, neither party. I don't mind being poor if I have a country that I vaguely recognise. That's what you're not understanding. You've packed our country full of low-paid immigrants. You have destroyed us. We are sinking under the weight of people. I don't mind not having a lot if I can walk out onto my street and not be stabbed, go to a Christmas market without armed police officers, and get on a bus without listening to 15 different languages that I then have to go into a school to try to ferret my way through teaching in English, my mother tongue. That's what you're not getting. The British people don't want either of you. We want reform. Sorry to shout, but I am so angry. Cheers, bye-bye.
Well, the Matthews are actually still here. Perhaps to get your reaction to that, Matthew Torbett.
Yes, I recognise Anna. Anna was it?
Anna,
I recognise Anna's frustrations. I take slight issue with being worried about what languages you're listening to on a bus, but that's for her. I think I don't set out to defend the Labour Party. I call it as I see it. I think I've done that again today, and I think I will stick up for the right thing. But ultimately, I'm not a patriot. Yeah, I won't come here and just defend the indefensible, and I don't think I would. I think reform are an issue. What I would say is, what are they proposing?
For many people, they're a positive issue. For many people, they want to.
No, they're an issue for the Labour Party. Ultimately, I think anyone that overlooks them is naive. But I don't see what they're proposing that's any different. There is something to be said about her point where we haven't trained enough of our own people and have imported a lot more.
OK, quick reaction from Matthew Goodwin-Freeman.
I think what Anna says is a lot of what people feel. The only thing I would count back against is say, neither of us are MPs, neither of us have been MPs, neither of us have been a part of the governments. It isn't our faults, if actually, Anna, if you want to go and look at some of my tweets, you'll see that actually we agree on probably quite a lot of things.
I think we're probably as frustrated as Anna, to be honest.
I think we are annoyed.
Yeah, there is a lot of frustration there. Listen, thank you to Anna for her message. Merry Christmas to you, and indeed to the two Matthews. Want to move on now to something we were talking about yesterday, actually, and this is around Sarah Sharif and the fact that the judge in the case has said that the previous judges, the family court judges, can't be named. He's put a gagging order on that, and there was, I think, perhaps a little bit of confusion that people thought, and I thought as well, actually, that perhaps the social workers couldn't be named in all of this. We've got a bit of clarity on that. Apologies for the confusion on that. But Marcella Leonard is with us. She's a social worker and director of the Leonard Consultancy. And Marcella, it's great to talk to you this morning. Thank you for joining us. And on this Sarah Sharif case, I think there's just a lot of frustration from an awful lot of people that perhaps accountability won't happen. They hear a lot of reviews, they hear a lot of thoughts and ideas that, you know, lessons will be learned from these cases. Yet in this case, 15 times, in fact, there were chances to save Sarah Sharif, this little girl, and then it didn't happen. What is your thought on how we should deal with this?
Good morning, Peter. Thank you for having me on. I think firstly, it's just one of those cases of extreme sadness when you realise the litany of heroin abuse that wee girl suffered at the hands of somebody who actually fundamentally should have been the person to protect her in life. And I think it's the level of the violence is just so shocking that her little body, I mean, you're showing a picture of her now, I mean, her little body had just to sustain and live her final days and months and weeks in this life under such pain. It's just horrendous. And it's horrendous because very, very sadly, Sarah's not the first child to die in such circumstances. And I think fundamentally we need to really look at what has happened and to properly learn from it to make sure this doesn't happen again. But there are failings and there are fundamental failings as to how come a 10-year-old child can die in such extreme violence in the UK in today's world, and that happened. There fundamentally is questions that have to be asked about her death, like many other children's death.
As you know, Baby P, there have been cases where you are in Northern Ireland. We know about Victoria Clambier and so on. This seems to just keep happening. What are the challenges for social workers? Because I know there are a load of social workers, I'm sure including yourself, Marcella, who do a very, very good job, who really do work hard and do have the best interests of the children at heart. But there are clearly people who have failed here. There are clear failings in all those cases that I have just mentioned there, and this keeps happening. We keep hearing about these cases, and there are extreme things as well. There are things that should be noticed and should be acted upon that aren't. Is this a systematic failing? Is this human error? What do you think it is?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, Peter. I think firstly, you've always got to remember that as child protection social workers, we're dealing with people who fundamentally, unfortunately, are human and are causing harm to children. So you've got to work that you're already working sometimes against the flow. You're already trying to work with people who fundamentally, for example, in this case here, you're dealing with a man who had a fundamental belief in the use of violence in his home. He fundamentally believed in what he called legitimate punishment. He fundamentally believed that the only thing that went wrong was that his beatings went too far. So when you're dealing with somebody of such extreme beliefs, it's very, very difficult to decide, well, what are we going to do in that? I think there were here, we've got to remember, firstly, that child grew up in a home where it wasn't only just the fact her father was violent to her. Her stepmother completely complicit and agreed with that violence. An uncle was present in that house. The fact that she was homeschooled, there was no other safe adult in that child's life. The neighbours heard and felt they could do nothing, but also the stepmother's family knew and felt and didn't do anything. So you've either got a culture, and this is very difficult for social workers to break into, if you have a family where there's a culture of belief in that violence is okay, that aggression is okay, that domestic abuse is okay, that misogyny is okay, that it's all right to use your children in some ways your own property to do what you like, it's very difficult for a social worker to break into that. However, equally, there were signs here that the social workers could have stepped in. That, you know, there was, when the child was at school, there was bruises, but within a month that case was closed. No case of physical abuse, Peter, should be closed within 1 month, because For example, things like, and I don't know because I don't know, obviously there's a whole load of confidential material that we, unless you carry out the review, you'll not get to know.
Yes.
But if, for example, a proper medical was carried out in that child at the time of those bruisings, would you have been able to identify other, for example, bruising that would have been there? That would have given more indication of this not being a one-off incident of, a parent potentially just in the spur of the moment, maybe losing it and becoming upset and being very sad and sorry for what they've done. But also, for me, the closing of the case, it wasn't just the closing of the case within the month. The very fact that he then removed the child from the school is more than just a red flag. That would be very clearly, you would have been saying there, hold on a moment, this family has just had a child. We've just been questioning this child about bruising, and they've now removed that child from school. That immediately should have been...
And I think a lot of people...
Get a stronger colour than red, it should have been a strong red colour, a flag.
Of course, and I think a lot of people, Marcella, will say, you've pointed that out. That is a very clear point. Yet this was missed. And there are so many people who worry about this. And they worry about, I think, the accountability aspect. And I wonder if I could just ask you about this idea from the judge that previous family court judges and people involved in this case can't be identified. Do you think that's the right opinion, this gagging order that has been put out there? Because a lot of people will feel, where is the accountability here?
I think, Peter, I suppose I'm one of these people. It's not about necessarily naming and shaming. I think for me, genuinely, I'm one of these individuals where I think I would be of this strong belief and I'm understanding that there will be a very clear review carried out in this case. And within that review, everybody that would have been involved will be named within that review to get the learning. If I can maybe move it, rather than it's just about the gagging of individuals, where I think the concern is, sadly, this wee child is not the first child to die in such violence in the UK. What the issue is why are we not learning from the previous cases rather than only focusing on the gagging? My issue is, why have we not learned from previous cases? There's where the accountability is. And is that because there is no learning from, for example, in the family court judges? Is there no learning in terms of the social workers? Is there no learning in terms of, for example, from the police, from the neighbourhood? Why did the neighbourhood not feel they could say anything? Is there no proper resources going in terms of the help? So was the case closed, for example, because of caseloads? And I would have to say currently...
Okay, but I think with within what you say there, Avril, there will be people who say, look, we've had reviews like this before. We've had all sorts of times when this has clearly been unacceptable. I mean, you have said it's hard to know what to do when a family abuser believes fundamentally and culturally that violence is not acceptable in the home. But many would argue actually that's not difficult. It's illegal. There's a law there. There's a framework in which a social worker can act and be very, very clear there. Surely that's correct.
Peter, that's absolutely correct. And I suppose what I meant by that was that it's whenever a social worker enters into a family like that, that family just closes ranks. And what tends to happen as well, the child learns to say nothing. The child learns that... But
surely it's up to the social workers to penetrate that family and to say, to be the voice and to be the advocate for the child within that.
Completely, Peter. And what they need to do as well is, in order to do that, they need to remove that child from that house. There's no point in questioning a child, for example, in a school, and then the child would return home that evening, because the child's only going to get punished more for telling. So I think we need much more proactive child protection. But in order to do that, we need to be able to say, for me, the big error here is, how come when a child, there was already bruising, the school did their job, the school noticed it and reported it to social services, but to say and to close a case within a month, when there's physical bruising of a 10-year-old child, is very significant.
Why do you think there were 15 different times when this could have been dealt with and weren't? I mean, you've mentioned a couple of them there, but there were 15 different occasions when this actually could have been prevented, when this child could have been taken into care, when these people perhaps could have been prosecuted. I mean, that is a huge systematic failure. That's not one or two things that went wrong. That's 15 different things that went wrong.
I think part of the problem, Peter, sometimes is that where everybody sees an incident and an incident is being treated as an individual incident as opposed to cumulative effect, and realising this is cumulative.
Will a review sort that? Will a review sort that out? Because I think, again, it comes back to the fundamental point to say, well, lessons can be learned. But are they actually ever learned? Have you seen in your career, actually, that lessons are learned, that systems are better? Because cases like these, I know they're extreme, I know that they're not that rare, but they do keep happening.
They do keep happening, and I suppose what's tending, I suppose, Peter, in my, certainly from domestic violence, so one of the core issues, for example, about this individual, this man, I mean, this man's previous in terms of Sarah's mother was known domestic violence, and that was why that original relationship, my understanding is why that broke up. So you've also got to look at the links between, for example, domestic violence and child abuse. You've got to look at the links in terms of that understanding coming from a cultural perspective that punishment of a child is legitimate as long as you don't beat them so hard. You know, you've got to look at all of those things, and I think when
we can't ever accept that. I know you're not suggesting we should accept that, but we can't accept that at any point. I wonder about resources and social workers, vacancies. There are quite a few vacancies, of course, the workload there. Presumably this is leaving children vulnerable as well when there just aren't enough people to actually intervene, and when they do intervene, they're pressed because they have so many cases.
Resources is significant. For example, here in Northern Ireland, a lot of our trusts are sitting with, for example, a 50%, up to sometimes a 50% vacancy in child protection. So you're absolutely right. Resources matter. But also what matters as well is that, again, it's not just the resources. What we're having is, for example, because the vacancies are in child protection, we tend to get quite newly qualified or less experienced social workers going into child protection because there's where the vacancies are. And I'm not saying necessarily they're getting, for example, are they getting all the supervision they need, all the resources that they need? The cases are piling up. There is no doubt, without any doubt, the number of cases being referred into social services now is greater than it ever was in terms of that complexity. And that's partly got to do with, for example, it's got to do with poverty, it's got to do with addictions, it's got to do with mental health, it's got to do with domestic violence, it's got to do with all sorts of different cultural, societal reasons as well.
You mentioned the cultural. You mentioned the cultural aspect of that, and actually, we had someone mention that yesterday in the programme. Can some of this failure be down, perhaps, to cultural sensitivity? Oh, I don't understand this, I don't want to intervene necessarily. I'm thinking of the Rotherham aspect previously, the grooming gangs, and the fact that in this case you're saying, you know, obviously the family believed fundamentally different things to what are often seen, what are values in this country often of, you know, we don't beat our kids, we don't see violence as a weapon, there are very strong laws around smacking, for example.
I think we can't ignore culture, and we have to name it for what it is. I mean, whenever he was first said, he actually said it was that he didn't mean to kill her, he just beat her too hard. I mean, if you have that fundamental belief that violence, it is horrendous. I mean, so you can't not ignore and tiptoe around. There is a cultural aspect here because also the family system supported that as well. So I think we need to be very clear about that. But when you know
that, Marcella, when you know that, when that's clear, surely the second that a parent or guardian reveals they think beating a child is okay, that child should be urgently removed.
I think there has been clearly a missed opportunity here, Peter, to remove this child. But I think we also need to remember as well, not just Sarah, because the other children in that house, what must it have been like for them to watch that violence, to see their sibling tied up on a bed, to see their sibling being beaten, to see their sibling crying, to see their sibling with a bag over their head. So I think we also need to remember there was other children in that house that were equally exposed to the same level of violence. Now, we may not have evidence that they were directly hit, but what we do know, whether that's domestic violence or child abuse, they've also witnessed that. So for me, it wasn't just about stepping in for Sarah. They needed to look at all of the children in that home. And I think that's of significance as well, in terms of that we also had 5 other children who never said anything that we know of. So why is that? Were they that frightened to be able to speak? Or were they given a cultural belief as well that
or both?
Because or both, absolutely. So I think it's to me there are cultural questions, there's resource questions, there's a fundamental understanding of domestic violence and misogyny that needs to be addressed in the review of this case.
Marcella, thank you very mumuch indeed. That's Marcella Leonard there. She's a social worker and director of the Leonard Consultancy. What do you think about this? 0344 499 1000. There are lots of different views about this, including the gagging order, which Bob in Cheltenham has been in touch about. He says the principle of fair and open justice is sacrosanct in the criminal justice system, and judges use their discretion to impose witness anonymity during and after trial sparingly in cases where there is a real risk of serious harm to the individuals. There may be more to this than in terms of risk than we are not aware of. However, judges shielding fellow judges because of the decisions they made when their very role is to make judgments which can then be scrutinised by the public is totally inappropriate and only harms the public's view of our legal system, both criminal and family law. I'm glad to see this ruling is being appealed. Great show as always, says Bob, and thank you to Paul, who's been in touch as well. He says, I'm listening to your show with this lady. She's talking endlessly about how the fault falls on so many people. It's really simple. The father's responsible. He should not be in prison. He is a human failure and should be removed permanently from society to set an example. I do realise that you probably won't read this out. I think your show is very good. Paul, thank you. I'm happy to read that out. I'm happy to read out really anything within the law because we are the home of free speech. I disagree with you. I don't think the death penalty would have been a deterrent to this monster, a horrible person. I think the deprivation of his liberty is the right way forward. But listen, tell me what you think. Maybe you think I'm talking nonsense, and thank you to Paul. I appreciate that, and Merry Christmas to you. We'll talk in a second about veterans. We'll talk about how they are dealt with. We'll talk about Christmas in regard to veterans and Afghanistan and whether it is swiftly becoming a forgotten war. Stay with us here on Talk.
Let's get a voice note from Rowan.
Jingle bells, labour smells, stormers flew away. Rainer mentions tax on second homes that you won't even pay. Hey, jingle bells, labour smells, Lamb is just insane. I can't wait for Trump, Elon and for us to save the UK. Whee!
Hey, very good, Red. 5, 4, 3. No, forget it. We're not even going to go there.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including this person in regard to the child abuse case of Sarah Sharif. Too many similarities between other cases such as Arthur Labenjo Hughes, where neighbours expressed huge concerns, schools letting children down. As for social workers not breaking into family ideas of punishment, they need to be able to break into these cultural ideas and stop abuse. There needs to be more local governing of police, so police know their families and communities know their police and social workers. Thank you for that. Really appreciate that comment. Thanks also to Anna, Stephanie, who says, Anna spoke for thousands of us. Good for you, Anna. This was the voice note that we played just about 10 minutes ago. Send your feelings to your MP and tell him to read it out in Parliament for all parties to hear, him or her, if he or she has the guts. Happy Christmas, Peter. Safe trip. Love your show. Thank you. Shane says, Labour seek to ban foreign donations. Why don't they start with the unions, who I presume have a lot of foreign workers contributing to the unions, who then give that money to Labour? Musk has businesses in the UK and wishes to donate to Reform UK. What's the difference apart from scale? And in Labour's case, it is us. It is not us, so he can't. Well, let's talk to Johnny Ball now. He is the co-founder of the UK Afghanistan's veteran community. Johnny, we know, of course, it's over 2 years now, about 2.5 years since the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and I think there is, there are 150,000 veterans of Afghanistan. You've conducted some research now about how we remember Afghanistan, how we support our veterans, the people living with the physical and mental scars perhaps, or indeed just people who served there who are absolutely fine. Just tell us what you found there.
Well, the first thing we do is give us a voice. So I'm enormously grateful, as ever, for your support, Peter, because you are a stalwart for veterans. But we did conduct some independent research with the help of M&C Saatchi World Services as part of their commitment to the Armed Forces Covenant. And almost 1,600 veterans responded to that survey. And the stark reality is that 92% of those worry that the sacrifices that we all gave as veterans of Afghanistan will be forgotten. Now, we need to learn the lessons from the past and previous conflicts, and we simply can't allow this to happen. We are mostly a working age population and a national strategic asset in your workplaces, in your communities. So that is why we are making noises about this.
I know you yourself are an Afghanistan veteran. You're a military linguist training Afghan police. You were working the stabilisation effort. You rebuilt a school. You had a commendation for your work there. There'll be many people like you, Johnny, who served in Afghanistan. I wonder, is there a risk perhaps of it becoming almost a forgotten conflict?
I think it is, but the joy of what we found, bringing these people together, as we did at Remembrance Sunday, for the first time in our history as Afghanistan veterans in a marching contingent, literally following in the footsteps of the Normandy Veterans Association and the South Atlantic Medal Association of the Falklands before us. When we get together, we don't feel forgotten at all. It's instant connections between this amazing group of people, but there is a risk that we will be forgotten, which another thing that came out in the survey was the response to what the media have done in responsibly reporting on Afghanistan. And the veterans feel there's about 50-50. Organisations like yours that give us a voice are brilliant, but actually some that don't. And we almost do it a little bit too little too late. We love to talk about veterans when they're elderly, which is we should continue to do, and I will always do that. But what about the living? What about this national strategic asset of amazing people that we have, 150,000 of us, and our families, and the fallen too?
There's also a bit of stereotyping, I think, of a lot of veterans. We think that every single veteran has PTSD. Every single veteran has problems with family breakup, or often when people think of veterans, they sometimes think of people being homeless and so on. All of those are part of what veterans are to some degree, and I'm not minimising any of those social problems at all, but there's a really positive story to tell about veterans as well, about the skills they have, about what they can bring back into our community, what they've learned in Afghanistan, what they've learned in all these different theatres of war as well, and even if they haven't seen sort of active service, as it were, as well, we can actually learn a lot from them, and we can integrate them into our workforce really well. I wonder, just as Christmas is coming up and we're thinking about 2025, what are your sort of wishes, Johnny, for how we treat veterans differently in the next year?
Well, you're absolutely dead on with that analysis. Absolutely. I can probably fall into that mad, bad or sad category, but I'm actually quite a high-functioning human being. Thank you very much. I have been through mental health trauma, and for anyone that is feeling that they need help, it is there. Op Courage. Look it up. It's immense. It will save your life. But I think going forward for 2025, it's really important to shift the narrative. We don't want sympathy. We are not victims, but we can be valued. Make use of us. So not sympathy, but empathy. Just understand us. Ask veterans. Get to know veterans. I hope to feel that the conversations we've had over the last few years, Peter, have widened your understanding of veterans.
100%.
Because we need to, this is a great group of people, and we as the UK Afghanistan veterans community will continuously campaign. And our event in Parliament only a couple of weeks ago, we had cross-party representation as we presented our report to Parliament, and 14 of those new MPs in Parliament are Afghan veterans themselves. So we've got a real opportunity here to grasp this opportunity and make sure that Afghan veterans are valued. We're not victims.
Thank you so much. That's Johnny Ball there. He's co-founder of the UK Afghanistan Veterans Community. Thank you to him. Thanks also to Mick, who's been, to Gareth, who's been in touch. He says, all wars are forgotten eventually, apart from world wars, and that is because everyone was involved, and now people often don't know or care. It's so sad. Well, let's hope that that's not the case in 2025. And Mick has been in touch to say, see the future of local leadership with more Sadiq Khans. It is a joke. And Shane says, my Christmas Grinch or Scrooge would be the whole cabinet. Every policy they are pursuing is going to send the UK into a sterling crisis with high taxes, no growth and high inflation, also becoming more Orwellian. We're heading back to the 70s very quickly. I want to get an update now on what is happening in Germany and what we know now that we didn't yesterday. James Jackson is a journalist who is live from Berlin, and of course we know now the death toll has risen within that horrendous terrorist attack. James, perhaps you can just update us.
So I think today the focus has shifted away from just the attack itself to failings by the security services, because it has been confirmed by the Office of Migration that they've received a very serious tip about the strange and erratic and dangerous behaviour of the suspect Talib A, as he's known under German law. And all they did, you can see the screenshots which they've confirmed, all they did was they said, oh, well, we can't do anything, so you have to contact these people. Further screenshots have emerged from the Berlin police saying something similar. Well, this guy's in, Saxony-Anhalt, which is about 2 hours away, so you have to contact them. And what's actually quite sad here is that the person reporting is begging the authorities to do something. She says very clearly, I can't speak German, I can't use their website, so please can you do something? And of course what we got was effectively computer says 9.
Yeah,
which I think is actually really
feelings here. Clear feelings here. I mean, there'll be many questions, not least, there seems to be a slightly confusing picture about what his beliefs were. Some of the stuff he put online appears to be contradictory, but what we do know is that there were warnings from many, many quarters, and those were ignored. What is the mood of the German public at the moment in regard to this attack, this horrific pre-Christmas attack?
Well, I think, yes, it's a mixture of sadness and outrage, really. So there have been protests against migration on the streets of Magdeburg last night, including, sadly, speeches by neo-Nazis and chants of, deportation, and even some reports of unconfirmed of Nazi chants. But then, of course, there is the fact that this attacker seems to have been anti-migration himself, because he was reportedly an ex-Muslim, anti-Muslim extremist who thought Germany was trying to Islamize Europe by letting in too many Syrians and not enough Saudis. But of course, he had very erratic beliefs and actions. So something else that's come out was that he had been calling the police on his rivals. He has even been due to appear before court for setting off a fire alarm in a police station. So really odd behavior, which should have been a red warning flag for the authorities, but actually it turns out they did a threat assessment of him in 2023 and found that he wasn't a concrete danger. So the Interior Minister, Nancy Faeser, has announced that there will be an investigation, but I'm not sure if it will go far enough.
Okay, James, thank you very much indeed. That's James Jackson, who's a journalist in Berlin there, bringing us the latest on the Magdeburg terrorist attack there. Thank you to him for that. In just a minute, we're going to start, and we will do this between now and 1 o'clock, we're going to check in with a few people who really made an impression in regard to their calls this year. I love callers on this station. We haven't taken many today because it's been a very, very busy show, but we'll certainly take some between now and 1. And we're going to check in on a few people who told us their stories and really moved me on many occasions. And we're just going to check in on them just as Christmas comes up, just to wish them a Merry Christmas and to see how they're getting on. We're going to start with Carol in Cornwall after the break, and she told us about her husband who has Alzheimer's and wanted to die at one stage. We'll remind ourselves of what Carol said, and then we'll have a chat to Carol and a few others actually throughout the programme between now and 1 o'clock who stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to Mary in County Down who sent me this message. She says, friends of mine were applying to be foster parents. When asked for their experience of physical punishment, they both said they'd been smacked as kids and didn't think it harmed them. Social worker was unhappy about their attitude, and there were very detailed and lengthy conversations about the topic to be sure that the couple understood that smacking is wrong and other discipline methods should be used. They were horrified that anyone might think they would use violence towards a child. They viewed it as something from the past. This was good practice by the social worker, challenging attitudes and pausing the process for further investigation and learning. They're now fostering 3 children and work very closely with the social workers, but say the social workers are massively overworked but always alert to the children's needs, and there are quite a lot of people getting in touch about this as well. Tony, who is in Glasgow, says about the child abuse case, people are fed up of hearing every time lessons will be learned. Nothing ever changes. The social work management needs to be held to account and to face criminal action. There's absolutely no excuse for this little girl, Sarah Sharif, being let down. And there's no excuse for the social workers not acting on the 15 different occasions. It wasn't just social workers, it should be said. It was police, it was teachers, it was a lot of different people. In my opinion, they were negligent and unprofessional. Great show as always. Happy Christmas to you and your family. Thank you very much indeed for that message. Now then, what we're doing now, and at a couple of stages throughout this programme between now and 1 o'clock, is we're going to check in with a couple of people who made an impression, who told us their story, as you often do when you ring me on 0344 499 1000. One of them was a woman called Carol in Cornwall, and I just want to remind you a few months ago what Carol told us. you've told us about Derek, and I want to hear more about Derek, but I want to hear about what life is like for you as well, Carol. Are you being supported? Are people helping you? Because you are really going through the mill here, not just emotionally, but also financially as well, Carol.
No, nobody's supporting me, but I have no complaints about that. All my life I've been mostly self-sufficient. I don't expect people to help me.
My goodness, would you reach out for help if you needed it?
No, I don't think so. I would always find a way of coping myself. It's the way I've been brought up.
Okay.
Look, my husband is 63, but I'm 77.
Okay.
So I'm 14 years older than my husband. And I'm of a different era, you see, than today. The way I was brought up was, you've got a problem, you sort it. You don't ever think of yourself as a victim, and you certainly just get on, you take it on the chin, and you plod on.
That was Carol who told me about Derek, her husband, who has Alzheimer's. He is having a very, very rough time, and she was too. Well, Carol, I'm delighted, is back with me now. Carol, Merry Christmas to you. How are you, and how have things developed since we last spoke on that topic?
Well, Merry Christmas to you and all the Talk family. Well, first of all, I would like to say how thankful I was for the very kind messages that came in after our conversation towards Derek and his predicament. I really appreciated that. People are so very kind.
They certainly are.
Yes. Now, I'm afraid things are not good at all. I haven't seen my husband in 2 months. Whereas I used to visit him on a regular basis.
Why have you not seen him?
Right. Well, I think you may remember, you may not, that I did say last time we spoke that he was becoming quite hostile.
Yeah.
And so visits were quite difficult in that as soon as you arrived, he wanted you to go. And so what's happened since is that all his work colleagues who used to pop in on a regular basis to see how he was doing no longer come, because he either refuses to talk to them or he tells them it's time for them to go as soon as they arrive. The same thing, and his sister also gets the same treatment. And so it became obvious. So I spoke to the manageress and I said to her, look, what are we going to do? I like to keep an eye on him. I feel responsible, and apart from the fact that I care very much about what's happening to him.
Yeah, of course.
And she said, well, why don't you phone up just before you're going to come in for a visit, and we can ask him if he's up for a visit.
Yeah.
And do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So we did it that way. And within 25 minutes, I was at his room, and the first thing he said to me was, "What are you doing here?"
Right. Yeah.
And I said to him, "Well, you did say you were up for a visit, so I wanted to come and see you, so that's why I'm here."
Yeah.
And he said, no, I did not. I did not say that. So what we've got is quite a bit of cognitive decline.
Yes.
And so things are becoming very difficult. So now it became apparent from listening to the professional carers that after visits, whether it's me or his sister, he becomes very, very agitated. And he can't bear the thought that we have come, but we've gone and we've left him.
I remember hearing from someone talking about dementia, talking about Alzheimer's, that at the start they don't recognise you, and at the end you don't recognise them. I wonder if that is something that you've felt.
Well, of course, his main issue was Parkinson's, and so the Parkinson's does bring on cognitive decline.
Yeah.
Although he has not officially been diagnosed with dementia, not officially, but I think it's perfectly obvious that's what's happening. So I'm unable to keep an eye on him, and I can only describe it as like a bereavement by stages. You the first bit is where you feel you've abandoned them because they've had to go into a home. So although they're there...
But you haven't, Carol. You've done everything you should have done, and he's getting the best care there, and I know it must be so tremendously difficult to deal with, but you're doing right by him. I wonder what sort of a Christmas you're going to have, Carol.
No, we're going to have a good Christmas.
Good.
Because, yeah, we're going to have a good Christmas. Some really good things have happened. As you know, financially it's been difficult, still paying for his care. And so my sister and brother-in-law transferred £300 into my bank account.
Well, marvellous.
Yes, to help pay with the fuel. They sent me a huge box of presents because they know I can't afford to buy presents anymore. And I have an excellent piece of meat in the fridge. So the dog and I are going to have a warm home.
Yeah.
We're going to have a good food. And what I'm hoping for is that in the new year, if I sneak in to see my husband, things might change.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I can't make his life more difficult. I can't do what I want. It must be what's best for him.
Yeah, and Carol, that's always, I know, been absolutely your priority. Carol, lovely to talk to you again. A very happy Christmas to you, and thanks for joining us again here on Talk. Stay with us.
Anything like this before? I mean, I don't know enough about your history really, but I mean, have you ever done anything like this, and was it hard finding a place to record it and put it out there?
No, I've never done anything like this at all, Mike. And to be honest, the whole thing, I basically made it from my computer at home. You know, I hired a guy to do the vocals. He had his own booth. He did that. He sent them to me. I hired a second guy to do the video, and then I did all the work in between, putting it together and producing the track just at home, basically. So it was all just done essentially in my bedroom.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, it is one of the days just before Christmas, as of course you will know. A friend of mine's just been told she's been given some speciality cheeses, and as we know, Christmas is all about many things, but speciality cheeses are one of them. Why do people sort of run towards speciality cheeses when it comes to Christmas? It's a mystery I've never been able to unravel. But one thing that they are doing, they may be running, they may be getting in a car, they may be going on a train, they may be getting on a plane, as I'm hoping to do later today if all is well. Simon Calder is the travel correspondent of The Independent. How are things looking out there, Simon?
Peter, great to talk to you. I'm here in beautiful Vienna. I'm actually just heading for the airport myself on the Airport Express. But things going an awful lot better here in Vienna than they are at London Heathrow. We've had 100 cancellations in and out of the UK's main airport. That's entirely down to all the very strong winds. The Met Office told air traffic control yesterday it's going to be windy. Air traffic control told the airlines you've got to cut back your flights. British Airways, by far the hardest hit, or rather its passengers are 80 cancellations alone there. 3 round trips to Amsterdam, 3 round trips to Glasgow, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. There's the odd cancellation, but not too bad at all if you know anybody who's heading over that way.
I do.
And then on top of that, we have a number of other airlines, Lufthansa, Virgin Atlantic, Turkish Airlines, cancelling flights. And it's actually the last thing that anybody wants at this time of year. Because as you know and I know, we've talked about this, everyone's so invested in their journeys and they just desperately want to get where they need to be in time for the 25th of December. And things are sort of slightly running out of time. We've also had, my goodness, problems on the Stansted Express, the second time in 3 days there. Lots of people, I fear, missing flights because of that line breakdown. But the main story is actually across the Irish Sea and people trying desperately to get the boat across to the island of Ireland. As you and I have talked about, the main link between Great Britain and Ireland from Dublin, that's interrupted until 15th of January next year, and that means that everything's forced onto the other crossings. And would you believe Cairn Ryan in southwest Scotland to both Belfast and to Larne in Northern Ireland, all those ferries, and we're talking here about a dozen or so sailings, cancelled for the rest of the day right up until late tonight. So an awful lot of people who thought maybe we'll go via Scotland unable to do so. I'm just here getting off
the airport yourself. Just a quick word, Simon, on the roads in the UK. What are the ones to avoid?
Yeah. Okay. Well, the 62 earlier was.
Oh, I think we've lost Simon there. We'll certainly keep you updated in our traffic and travel bulletins in terms of the roads. But thank you to Simon Calder there, travel correspondent at The Independent, always on the move. And for some reason, usually the connection's absolutely fine wherever he is in Europe, although not always quite as good as it is here in the UK. Thanks to everybody who has been in touch, especially about Afghanistan as well. Ange in London has said, we mustn't let any veterans be forgotten. My father was in the Korean War in the early 50s. That wasn't even recognised until the 60th anniversary. Most of those veterans had passed by then. Luckily, my dad could still attend the marches. He was one of very few at the time. Brad in Cambridgeshire says that was a lovely piece regarding the veterans. It's clear from Johnny just how much they value channels like Talk. A very Merry Christmas to you. Thank you for your service to common sense. What a great guy Johnny Bull is. Says Mick, for all his great work. Peter, could you wish all serving military and ex-service personnel a very Merry Christmas and a safe New Year. He says, great show, Pete. Enjoy your trip to Northern Ireland. And thanks to Shane as well. It says, my Christmas Grinch or Scrooge would be the whole cabinet. Every policy they're pursuing is going to send the UK into a sterling crisis with high taxes, no growth and high inflation, also becoming more Orwellian. We're heading back to the 70s very quickly. Well, we're checking in with various people who have been callers throughout the year. Avril gave me a ring a few months ago talking about caring for her 96-year-old dad 20 miles away. I know things have developed there. Avril is in Bedford. You're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to update us on, Avril? How have things been?
Well, nothing much has changed. Things are getting worse in the country, which worries me a lot. But Dad is absolutely fine and doing very well. And we're looking forward to Christmas now. We're
fantastic. You told me that you had a big rent rise, and also your fuel allowance getting to your dad is something that's an issue as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is. My rent rise was 26% this year in February, and I'm worried to death it's going to go up again. Yeah. I've now found out that the housing benefit's going to be frozen next year as well, which is really
and a lot of people in your position, Avril. What sort of Christmas are you going to have, and what sort of Christmas are your family and your dad going to have?
Oh, we're all fine because I've got two brothers who help look after my dad, give him a good Christmas, and I've got 5 children who we all muck in together and have a lovely Christmas. So it doesn't affect me that much. It's just worrying going forward where I'm living, really.
Yeah, well, I wish you all the very, very best, Avril, for 2025, and I wish you a very Merry Christmas, and thanks for updating us on how you're getting on, and all the best to your dad and your 5 kids as well. Thank you to Jane, who sent me a lovely message here. She says, wishing you, your family and everyone behind the glass at Talk a very happy Christmas. Your shows will be brilliant throughout the year. Your interaction with your audience shows the person you are by helping others and taking time to talk to them. Enjoy your time off. Thank you, Jane. That's very nice. Jane is someone who texts in quite often, actually, and always speaks a lot of common sense, and want to say thank you to her as well. Lots of people with those sentiments, and of course the sentiments about what we're talking about today. Tony in North Yorkshire talking about why should the whole population have to live in fear, says Tony. The narrative should shift to making the lives of terrorists, their families and those who support them so terrible they do not attack us ever again. Susan in Cambridge says Rachel Reeves takes the biscuit. Not only is she not educated for the job, she's killed the economy and is a total embarrassment to all professional women, says Sue in Cambridge. And this person says, isn't the possible Elon Musk donation furore more about the establishment wanting their mega rich donors paying them rather than the other sides? If this potential donation was going to Labour, they would simply accept it, dig their heels in and justify it with more lies and deceit. And Betty has said, morning Peter, happy Christmas. Happy Christmas, Betty. People forget MPs' salaries and expenses were brought in to remove the class issue. The problem is that it has made politics a career. At least Rishi Sunak couldn't be bought for a cheap suit. He was there because he wanted to serve and have power. Tories want power, Labour wants control, and they're inherently involved in a class war instead of serving the country. Leslie says, could Matthew please advise us who in the Cabinet was competent? Well, we did ask him that question a little bit earlier on. And thank you as well to Kaz in Staffordshire, who says, Merry Christmas, Peter, and all the best for 2025. Happy Christmas too to all at Talk and all your lovely viewers and listeners. Well, listen, we have another hour to go until 1 o'clock. Looking forward to chatting about all sorts of different things, including Rachel the Grinch Reeves, Elon Musk, and we'll catch up with a couple of other callers as well. We're checking in because Christmas is coming up. Our next guest is Elliot Keck, who will talk about the 45% of your donations often going to the taxation, going to the exchequer. We're asking the question as well about who you think the Christmas Grinch is. Let us know. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Lots still to come here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk. Thank you so much for your company. I'm here until 1 o'clock. Lots to discuss, including Rachel Reeves. She's been called the Grinch by the Mail on Sunday. What do you think? Who do you think is the political Grinch of the year? And indeed, this Christmas, she is stealing, the paper says, 45% of your donations, according to some charities. The shocking cost of her national insurance raid to good causes. We're asking not just about Rachel Reeves, but the government in general. Who is the political Grinch of Christmas? We've been asking that question. And your calls are coming in 0344 499 1000. We've been talking to Kevin Hollinrake as well, who is the Shadow Housing Secretary, and we've been hearing from Lucy Powell, the Labour Cabinet Minister. We're now going to, in a second, hear from Elliot Keck, who's head of campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance, about this. We'll also talk about Elon Musk and Reform UK, and we will be promoting some of the brilliant small businesses that are the backbone of this country a little bit later in the programme, and checking in with a couple of the people who've made the headlines and indeed touched our hearts this year. Teresa in Leicester, you may remember, talked about being cold this winter. Huge response to that. She's not going to be cold this winter anymore. And Mark in Lincolnshire as well, we're going to check in with him. He said he hadn't received a Christmas card in 3 years. Question is, has my Christmas card actually arrived to him? I certainly hope it has. We will find out a little bit later on in the programme. There's loads to discuss. You can help us discuss it. Get your voice on the air. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word Talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. Loads to discuss. Stay with us here on Talk. Lots of people getting in touch on text as well and letting us know what you think about the stories today. Steve in Suffolk, my Christmas Grinch is Lord Ali, as he has given me nothing, says Steve. He's the one, of course, who gave all the suits and glasses and so on to Keir Starmer. And Penny in Essex on this story we're actually talking about now. She says, good morning, Peter. Good afternoon as well. Unbelievable, although perhaps not with this bunch, that we are now robbing charities. Disgraceful. People will now stop giving. Charities will suffer. Rachel Reeves is the Grinch. Liz Truss was a financial genius compared to her, says Penny in Essex, who very kindly calls me Peter the Great, which is perhaps not accurate, but nonetheless very kind of her. It's interesting on this issue, and indeed on the economy in general. Lucy Powell, who is the leader of the House of Commons, Labour Cabinet Minister, she's been talking about the economy and the inheritance from the Conservatives. I actually asked Kevin Hollinrake, the Shadow Housing Minister, about that. We did ask to speak to Lucy Powell, but she didn't have time this morning. She has spoken to Sky News, and this is what she said to Sky News.
Obviously, it's disappointing, these figures. You know, of course, we want to see these things happening faster. We want to see more growth in the economy, and we want to see that faster, but really so that it can be felt by ordinary people around the country. But this is a bit like turning around some huge oil tanker, and the underlying problems that the country faces, which are unprecedented and huge, which is why people voted for change, because they could see, quite honestly, going into that election, the country was going down the Swanee. We had living standards falling for the first time in our history going into that general election. We've had public services, particularly health and education, absolutely on their needs, in dire state of investment. And coming into government, we've had to really take some very difficult decisions. The inheritance and the public finances are even worse than we thought. We've had to take some
if you don't mind.
But we are starting to turn that oil tanker around.
Well, that was Labour's Lucy Powell speaking to Sky News a little bit earlier today. We played that clip, in fact, to Kevin Hollinrake, who is the Shadow Housing Secretary. This is what he had to say about it.
The oil tanker was already turned around. What they've done is sunk the bloody thing. I mean, it's Christ almighty. I mean, our economy is the fastest growing economy in the world's, in the G7, which is the world's biggest economies. And that was the first 6 months of the year. Since when the Labour, all the gloom and doom, if you heard it again there from Lucy Powell, all the gloom and doom, and then massive tax increases and massive more public spending, £70 billion of increase in public spending, £40 billion of which are tax increases.
Well, that was Kevin Hollinrake, who is the Shadow Housing Secretary, with some choice words there for Lucy Powell's thoughts on all of that. Well, let's get reaction from Elliot Keck. He's head of campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance. What do you make of the broad economic picture, first of all, Elliot, and what Kevin Hollinrake and Lucy Powell were saying? Do you have more sympathy with one than the other, Elliot?
Listen, I think the economic picture is pretty dire. I certainly wouldn't particularly promote the economic performance of the United Kingdom over the last few years, where not only has GDP growth been sluggish, but GDP per capita growth, which is arguably a more important measure in terms of living standards, has been sluggish. But there's no doubt things are getting worse. You see inflation going up, business confidence going down, gilt yields going up, and also growth prospects slash. So I think next year is looking like a pretty dire one for the United Kingdom, I'm afraid.
Elliot, I just wonder as well, in regard to this story on the front page of the Mail on Sunday, the Grinch Reeves steals 45% of your donations, say charities. This is a bit of analysis totting up the national insurance contributions and so on how much charities will have to pay out of the donations we give them. A lot of people giving money to charities, if this story is true, will find themselves very shortchanged.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's it's a good time to be talking about this story. Obviously, at Christmas, charities become far more salient, given the very genuine concern that the public has that there are a lot of people that are not experiencing the Christmases that they deserve and that they need, and all the rest of it. So I think it's absolutely right that we're talking about charities at the moment and talking about the problems that they will face as a result of the national insurance hike. I think it's probably also the one part of the country, that one part of the economy that the Labour Party will have some sympathy with. Let's be honest, this Labour Party, this Labour government don't care about private sector. They see the private sector as nothing more than a cash cow to milk. So it's a good time to be talking about this story, but we have to remember that it's the whole of the private sector that is going to be suffering as a result of the national insurance rise.
Where do you think, as head of campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance, the axe should fall? Because we know that there are some exemptions in regard to national insurance. What about GP surgeries, essentially private businesses giving services to the NHS? What about hospices, places like that? Should they have to pay these national insurance rises, or should they be exempted? What do you think?
Listen, my view is if you're going to increase national insurance, it needs to be increased across the board. And obviously my view and the TPA's view would be to not increase national insurance at all. But the problem is if you keep on creating these carve-outs, then you have this problem that you're exempting parts of the economy that, while are very important, they don't actually add to the economic growth and the economic potential. So, the parts of the economy that does drive economic growth, that does drive up living standards, that does pay most of the tax revenue, i.e. the private sector, is the only one that is being expected to pay this tax rise. And I think it's absolutely disgraceful that the public sector has a carve-out from this NI rise. It shows that it's very much one rule for them and another rule for everybody else.
Elliot, thank you very much. That's Elliot Keck there. He's head of campaigns for the Taxpayers Alliance. Well, as we've been doing a little bit this morning, we've spoken to a couple of people. I just want to check in with a few of our callers, not just to the weekend shows, but also my drive time shows and other shows throughout the week and so on that I present at various times. Teresa in Leicester really moved me. In fact, there were hundreds of people who emailed us, got in touch, worried about Teresa's welfare when she made this call a couple of months ago. I don't know what it's like in Leicester, but in London it's 0 degrees today, so I'm sure basically, everybody can afford it has the heating on.
No, I can't. I can't afford to put my heating on.
Have you not your heating on today, Teresa?
No, not at all.
Goodness me.
I'm living in one room with a little heater, because even though I'm lucky enough to get it,
yeah,
there's loads of people out there that are not getting it. How are these people going to manage? Do they really want us all dead?
So, Teresa, sorry, can I just clarify? You don't have the heating on at the moment, not even in the room you're in?
No.
It's 1 degree in Leicester at the moment. Is it just because it's so expensive that you're not turning it on today?
No, I won't turn it on. Because even with the fuel allowance, it's not enough to keep you warm all year. It's horrible. Absolutely horrible.
Well, a lot of people were very, very moved by that call from Teresa, including me, it must be said. A lot of people got in touch. A lot of people offered all sorts of things, offered Teresa money and things, and she was very clear that she didn't want money from people. She wanted to raise awareness, and she suggested that they give money to a charity, which I thought was a really selfless move. Teresa, we're respecting your privacy, and we're going to be sure not to give out any details that you don't want to give out, but I'm delighted that you're with me again, and what we do know now is that you will be warm this winter and things have been sorted out for you. Just let us know how things have got better, Teresa.
Oh, hi, Peter.
Hi there.
Yeah.
You sound a lot brighter.
I am. I was feeling. I was angry, and I felt quite deflated by this government at the time. Like I say, I'm lucky enough to get a fuel allowance, but honestly, with your pension and even with the little bit of pension credit that I get, it doesn't heat your house to the degree that you should have it done at this time of year. It just baffles me what this government's trying to do.
And I think a lot of people feel the same way. But Teresa, I know that you're warm today, and that your voice sounds better as well. Have things got a bit better since we were chatting?
They have, yes.
Good.
Definitely.
What sort of a Christmas are you going to have, Teresa?
Oh, I'm going to my daughter's. I was going to say tomorrow. No, on Wednesday.
Lovely. Excellent. And will that be a lovely family occasion? Are there any grandkids or anybody?
Yeah, I've got 6 grandchildren. They're not all hers, I should say, but I have got 6.
Right, okay. Yes, indeed. Well, that's wonderful, Teresa, and it's great to talk to you again. And I'm glad I a lot of people, a lot of our viewers and listeners, and I as well, share your view on the fact that, in terms of how this country is governed, it's not great, but at least personally things are better for you. And I wish you a really, really happy Christmas.
Well, and you too. And thank you for highlighting the plight of. There are many, many people out there worse off than me. I'll cope.
Okay. Teresa, thank you. Thank you so much.
A lot of people will end up in hospital if they don't do something about this.
You're right, Teresa, and we're going to keep a very, very close eye on it. Merry Christmas to you and your family. Thank you for joining us again and just giving us a little update. And Teresa, as I say, we're going to respect her privacy and not give out any details that we shouldn't, but we now know that she will be nice and warm this winter. And thanks to everybody who responded to that. And it just shows the compassion and the very best of our viewers and listeners. There were so many people who responded. We got a load of emails as well. Claire behind the scenes, who's our first line of defence with emails to feedback at talkTV. She did an absolutely brilliant job as well, and we got all sorts of things happen behind the scenes, and it was marvellous, and it showed the best of our viewers and listeners, and actually my colleagues here at Talk as well, and I want to thank them. And they don't get enough recognition, really. I do read out the names at the end of the programme a lot of the times when I have time, but there are a great bunch of people who work on my programmes and support me very, very well indeed. Martin in Wiltshire was in touch on the Sarah Sharif case. He says, hypocrisy is the word. These judges are incredible. It appears okay that hiding the identity of judges who made the previous rulings on behalf of the little Sharif girl. However, it is fine to name the police officer who lawfully shot Chris Kaba. Again, no rules for them, but many for us. Best wishes, says Martin in Wiltshire. Penny says, Elon Musk giving Reform UK so much money is great, but to be sure he'll want something from the UK for doing it. But if it was in China, I would be very concerned and worried. So that's a relief. It's not them, says Penny. Well, we're actually going to talk about this next with Gawain Tyler. He's a Westminster veteran. He also worked for Reform UK, and we will talk to him about this and what he thinks. We'll get your opinions too. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us next here on Talk.
Rachel Reeve's big danger now. She has so burdened and already over, the tax burden was at a highest record level at the end of the Tory years. It wasn't low then. She's added to it now, and I think we're in a very dangerous position.
And quite scarily, the other day when Sir Keir Starmer himself was asked, does this mean you're not going to put up taxes again? He said, well, I can't rule it out, which pretty much means, yes, we intend to.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Afternoon, Peter, says Sean in Bicester. The Grinches are the senior cabinet clowns in this awful government, and the Muppets are the deluded people who voted for them when things were just starting to turn around with the Conservatives, says Sean in Bicester. Thank you to Nick. He says, Grinch of the Year, Sadiq Khan. A man who has single-handedly turned our capital city into a no-go zone hellhole where only one community are looked after, and it is not the white British community, in Nick's opinion. Well, lots happening politically, including Elon Musk. Speaking of foreign influence, he is an American, and he is someone who possibly could give Reform UK quite a lot of money. It was interesting, Tim Montgomery, the previously Conservative campaigner, now Reform UK member, said it could be as much as £20 million. Gawain Tyler is a Westminster veteran. He used to work for Reform UK. And Gawain, I wonder how likely you think it is that Elon Musk could give this money, and how much you think he should give.
Honestly, I don't really think it's that likely he's going to give a large sum of money. But money begets money. The talk of money brings money. And so therefore, I think the very idea that was floated in the Times a couple of weeks ago that he was going to give Reform money has already kick-started other fundraising, which is very helpful to Reform. I think to a certain extent, what's more important, if you listen to what Farage said when he came out of that meeting with Musk the other week in Mar-a-Lago, is they talked very deeply about the operation in Pennsylvania. And I think what would be possibly even more useful to Reform is where we are weak is our ground game. People work very, very hard, but without the background data, without the knowledge of where people voted over the last 20 years, we've only been going for 3 years, 20+%, 22% I think average now. We've only been going for 3 years. To get that data and use the algorithms that Musk was using in those campaign key states in America, that in fact, knowing how to use that kit, getting hold of that kit as a donation in kind, that actually may be more important than pure cash.
And that's a really interesting point. Pennsylvania, of course, a swing state. Joe Biden himself had a lot of family links there. He grew up in Scranton. Kamala Harris, of course, had no links there in Pennsylvania for lots of reasons, not just those, but actually many more to do with immigration, to do with the price of groceries, to do with lots of different things, inflation, and so on, went to the Republicans. So specifically with Pennsylvania, just to illustrate that point maybe a little bit more for our viewers and listeners who might not be sort of totally familiar with the ground game, the point of the on what Musk and his people could perhaps teach Reform UK.
The point is being able to target voters, to learn who they are, where they live, what are they interested in, what are the key messages and key details that make them wake in the morning, make them happy, make them annoyed. And being able to understand who the people are who may vote for Reform, if we can reach them. That's what that data can provide. The other parties have spent years building up databases. We just haven't. And for us to compete properly on the ground game, that would be the most vital thing that we could possibly do. We're brilliant at the air war, as you're well aware. What we're really good is doing the media stuff. But what we're not so good, despite the hard work of our volunteers, is knowing where people live. being able to reach
and that is absolutely essential. Yeah,
in the modern political game, yes, 100%.
Just speaking of the American side of things, we know that Lord Mandelson, the new ambassador to the United States, he'll take up his post next year. Well, he has been called, and I quote, an absolute moron by the co-chairman of Donald Trump's re-election campaign. And we have Kim Darroch, who's the former ambassador, today saying, look, this is just what it's going to be like. This is going to be what Trump 2.0 is like. He says this is what life is going to be like under Trump 2.0, like a 24/7 barroom brawl. You get this sort of stuff, Lord Darroch says, going on all the time. You need to have a thick skin. You need to manage it and to get through it, to weather it, as it were. So Lord Mandelson is a very experienced politician. I'm sure he can cope with this kind of stuff. What do you think about Lord Mandelson as a choice? How do you think, given your knowledge of the Trump people, and how they're going to react to him?
To be honest, Kim Darroch, when he was the ambassador over there, he was a disaster. He almost actively campaigned against Trump when he was in that role. So therefore, that was an absolute disaster at the beginning of Trump's last term. I think Mandelson has the thick skin that Darroch mentions. He has the ability to mix it up, and he's also personally very charming. He didn't get called the Prince of Darkness because he was bad at his job. He got called it because he was very good at his job. And it is notable that since Trump's election, one of the very few people who's actually recognized the value of Farage's relationship with Trump is Mandelson. He has raised it. Look, there isn't a left or even centrist politician in Britain who hasn't slagged off Trump over the last 10 years. You'd be lucky to find anybody who hasn't tweeted something disobliging. But with Mandelson, you've got somebody who has a skill set. He is able to mix it. He has huge international experience. And he is not he's not unaware that there are other routes into the White House and the Trump team and the broader Trump cabinet. So I think that is something that is going to be very relevant. I mean, honestly, if you look around the Labour world, the milieu in which Keir Starmer lives, can you think of anybody more suitable? I can't.
It's a very good point, actually. Nigel Farage himself suggested at one point, before he became an MP, that he could be the ambassador. And I wonder if you could sort of give us your thoughts, your experience, obviously, of Nigel Farage in terms of what his role may well be in a Trump administration, even, obviously unofficially, but as some sort of conduit. Clearly, Keir Starmer has made it clear that he doesn't want to go through unofficial channels. He wants to go through official channels. But I think we're going to be in a really, really interesting situation, and Gawain, you may disagree with this, where Nigel Farage is sometimes going to know things before the government do because of his links to the Trump administration.
I think that's certainly the case. He will. It just will. Over the last, since 2016, Nigel's been a friend of Trump. And over that period of time, he hasn't just got to know Trump himself, but he's got to know many people in Trump's coming in cabinet. There is nobody better placed in the UK to get messages across or receive messages. And though Mandelson no doubt will do a best job he can, I think Nigel's a far better place. And I don't know if you saw a couple of weeks ago after PMQs, Starmer crossed the floor and went up to talk to Farage.
I did see that, yes. A number of people were asking me, what did they talk about? To which I said, I wasn't there, I don't know. Maybe you know.
Not precisely. But I think the suggestions are it was about the US. But it shows actually a little bit of flexibility on Starmer that we're not used to. There's no way that any of the Tory leaders post-16 would have ever done something like that. They saw Farage as an anathema. Starmer realised with a bit of statesmanship that he may be an anathema politically at home, but if you want to get on with the states, just maybe with the incoming president, being polite and civil to Farage isn't such a bad idea.
Yeah, and I think sorry, Gawain, go ahead.
I think that I think is a key point. And as I say, Mandelson's already flagged this up. Farage obviously speaks, and there's no doubt, and we're aware, the Chagos Islands issue is something that is very high on Nigel's agenda. It's also very high on the State Department's agenda and Trump's agenda. We see an attempt to rush it through before Trump sits in the Oval Office, but I think that would be a very foolish move on part of the government. particularly with suspicions of getting a little bit too close to China. So little things like that, the ability to have a back channel, even if it's only a very subtle one, cannot be a bad thing. It's called realpolitik and it's called statesmanship. And we, as a country, desperately need a little bit of that because we seem to have been run on dreams and idiocies for far too long.
Gawain, you may find yourself in a slightly strange position of actually agreeing with Diane Abbott. She has told, the Labour MP has told Times Radio, our colleagues over there, that she doubts Peter Mandelson will be effective as the US ambassador. So I wonder whether that is something you agree with. Speaking to Ed Vasey about whether Peter Mandelson is a good choice as the UK ambassador to Washington, she said, "We've seen in terms of the appointments into the general election a lot of what you might call Blairite retread. This is what it is, and Mandelson is more of the same. I'm not so sure Mandelson will be as effective as the US ambassador. I don't know if you've seen, there have been stories in the press over the weekend that some friend or supporter of Trump has been quite rude about Peter Mandelson. And as is someone very close to Trump, you realise how well Mandelson will come across when he finally turns up as ambassador. But perhaps you think he'll do a better job, and maybe Diane Abbott's wrong. I don't know. What do you think?"
I actually think he will do a better job. I knew him when he was over in Brussels as commissioner, and his ability to speak on behalf of the UK, even though he was taking a position that was an anathema to mine, was very clear. And I go back to the point: David Lammy or Peter Mandelson? Who would you choose? I mean, seriously.
Yeah, no.
Who would you choose from the Labour world who could do a better job? I can't think of anybody.
I'm not sure I would
really
trust.
can't.
I'm not sure I would trust. I'm not sure I would trust David Lammy to run a Welk stall, to be perfectly frank.
We have to deal with the situation we have got, rather than a dream world where you have somebody like Lord Palmerston reawaking from the dead and doing a job like that. So it's not going to happen. So as we have we've got, we have the personnel we have, and it is, you've got to remember Rishi brought back, or not Rishi, but where Haig was brought back from the dead to do foreign ministry duties.
And then David Cameron.
Yeah. So this sort of international relations job often requires somebody with a deep well of experience. And you've got to remember, these days, you don't send an ambassador to Washington and not hear from them for 6 weeks because the White Star Line hasn't sent a boat across. You've got things like telephones and emails. So then he's not operating as a sort of plenipotentiary fiefdom. He doesn't have a complete carte blanche. He will be operating within the rules and regulations and within the direction of Number 10 and the Foreign Office. So yes, he's there. Yes, he's good at the charming stuff. Yes, he's good at the dinner parties and the cocktail parties and that diplomatic world. But the actual hard politics will still be run by London, and it will be run by London on a minute-by-minute basis.
Gawain, what do you think of Reform's chances in the various elections coming up in the next little while? We've got the council elections in England, we've got Welsh Senate elections, I still call it the Welsh Assembly, and the Scottish Parliament elections, all within the next couple of years. And I mean, Labour is under a lot of pressure. There's absolutely no doubt about that. We've had some by-elections as well, where both the Conservatives and Reform have done quite well. Starmer's personal approval rating at minus 61%. Do you think it's there for the taking?
There for the taking would be a little bit arrogant, I suspect. The next year's council elections, we don't know what's going to happen because of these suggestions that some of them are going to get pushed back. Labour's been very clever. They want that to happen, but have put it into the hands of Tory council leaders to make those decisions. We've put an awful lot of work and effort into selecting candidates in those councils that are going to be fought next year. I think there's every reason we'll do well and pick up a good number of councillors and starts to push through into the English counties. But I think looking at Wales, there is no good reason to think that we wouldn't be challenging to win that election, to be the largest party in the Welsh Assembly.
You think that can happen? You think they can be the largest party? Do you think they'd be the government of Wales?
I have no doubt that that's entirely possible. I have no doubt. I mean, look, it's politics. Everybody can blow up and make a pig's ear of life. But if we don't make any major errors, and if we keep on working, I've seen the quality of some of the people who are bubbling out of the extra 70,000 members that we've picked up in the last 6 months. There's some really, really good people. We're getting excellent advice. There's good leadership on the ground in Wales, and in Scotland, again, you've got to think, in the Holyrood collective of Tories, every single one of them was a Tom Tugendhat supporter. There is, and Labour and the SNP are also looking at reform in Scotland as a party that can pick up 5-10 seats in Holyrood. No, we are becoming a real voice for people who've been disenfranchised and a real threat to the legacy parties.
Okay, Gawain Tyler, thank you very much indeed. He is a Westminster veteran and former worker and indeed senior figure in Reform UK as well. Mark and Selby, thank you for your message on text. He says, Merry Christmas to you and your cat. Thank you, Mark, it's very kind. Labour do not like it up them when it comes to donations from incredibly wealthy people. Keir takes gifts from Lord Ali and party donations from the unions to advance himself and his party. But when Elon Musk wishes to donate to Reform, suddenly that is unacceptable. We can see through Labour, who are as deep as a car park puddle. And as for Madison being our man in America, are you aware how much has been splashed on refurbishing the ambassador's home in Washington? It is obscene. Another bad appointment by Keir. Can't he get at least one thing right? Seemingly not. Leslie says, I love Gawain, he speaks sense. And on charities as well, Penny in Essex says, hi Peter the Great. She keeps calling me that. Very nice of you, Penny. Regarding charities and the government taking money from charities, will charities like the air ambulance and the lifeboats lose money to this awful government when people leave them money in wills like we're doing? Can you find out, Peter? I don't know is the answer. I know that certain levels of inheritance tax are not, it depends on the level of inheritance tax. If it's under, I think, £325,000, well then it's not subject to taxation. What is worth doing, Penny, if you are leaving money to those different organisations, is not saying a percentage of your estate, but a specific amount of money. So in my will, I've left money to 2 charities, and I've specifically said how much I want that money to be. So even if the quantum, when I pop my clogs, is not that much, that amount will be given to those charities, and the rest will go to Jack, of course. No, it won't. I haven't left everything to my cat, but maybe I have. I'll just leave that hanging in the wind there. Cliff in Berkshire says, Merry Christmas to you and yours. Thank you, Cliff, and to you as well. A lot of money is being made from charities, including the gangster state. We had a lot of charity door knockers trying to get us to set up a direct debit in favour of various well-known charities. It turns out that a lot of these door knockers receive the first year of donations as commission, and the charity only gets the donation each month once the commission period comes to an end. I also feel some charity CEOs are overpaid with their 6-figure salaries. Cliff, I go backwards and forwards in this, honestly. Certainly the CEOs, you want really good people running charities, but the whole idea of professional fundraisers and you pay people a lot of money and they bring in a lot of money, is that worth it? I think it probably is, but I also don't know. Sometimes I always have a little bit of doubt about that. The chuggers, what they call the charity muggers, people who go door to door or in the street as well. Have you got a minute to talk? Tell us about this charity and so on. Oh, it's also marvellous and wonderful. Look, they need to make a living. I get that, but also I have a lot more respect for the people who are volunteers and holding the the tins for money to go into. But listen, like everything else, it changes. These things change and there are developments, and they see the ways in which they can raise money. But personally, I don't stop for chuggers. I say, no thank you, or I'm busy, or I'm on my way. I'm polite to them. They've got a job to do, I'm polite to them, but I will not stop for them, and I'll not give them my direct debit things. In fact, I moved. There was one charity I did support, and I moved from that charity to another charity. And my first question when I rang up the second charity that I have continued to donate to, actually, not that I'm Mother Teresa, I don't give as much as I should, but I give a little bit. My first question was, do you use chuggers? Do you use these people in the street? And they said, no, we don't. And I said, thank you very much. You will now be the recipient of my donation. And I challenged, actually, the head of a big homelessness charity. When I was in government, I challenged the head of a big homelessness charity about this and said, look, I don't think this is the right way. And he said, look, they bring in the money. So listen, that's a debate perhaps we can have on another occasion. We're going to debate more. We're going to talk to Anne in Sussex on the other side of the break about Sarah Sharif. We're also going to check in with Mark in Lincolnshire as well. Did my Christmas card arrive? We will find out in just a minute here on Talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Anne is in Sussex and has given me a ring at 0344 499 1000. Anne, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say? I think it's the Sarah Sharif case and social workers that you've perhaps given me a ring about.
Well, yes, and that's linked to local authorities. Of course, like the whole of the country, that is shocking. Another child loses her life, and all the warning signs were there.
Yeah.
As soon as she wasn't absent from school. But I think the warning signs were there when her mother was pregnant and he was violent. I think, one, I have concerns about the way social workers are trained. And I've always said, and I've been involved in many cases where children have been taken into care and the children have been given to the violent fathers, would you believe, as well. I mean, things go wrong on all sides. You know, when there is a concern, there should be two social workers who go into a family where they can't seem to get the right response, because one would pick up signs that the other doesn't, and there's a strength in saying, I need to see that child now.
Yeah.
And I would not just send one. And of course, I think I've said before, many social workers who are senior and well trained go into management.
You're right.
The young ones who haven't had
it's resourcing as well, Anne, isn't it? It's making sure that the right people are there with the right training, but also we keep being told with these inquiries and so on, you know, lessons will be learned, this will never happen again, and then it does.
Oh, look, I grew up in Brighton where Maria Colwell was killed, and I went to the authorities to say what I was going through, and they sent me back with a letter. So maybe that's why I've always fought so hard for families, because I know that they all need help, and lack of knowledge is as bad as lack of money.
Yes,
and the other thing you see is I've been sitting at meetings where an enormous amount of money is being paid recruiting social workers. It isn't just social workers that we need. It's family therapists. We need the health visitors or the child health visitors that visit the family. I think in Belfast, Peter, you would know the wonderful system where they used to visit for the first year every month.
Yeah.
And they would help the parent to parent, because a lot of parents never go near a baby until they have one, and that was very good. But my concern is that we are coming to another situation with the local authorities where council tax will be increased. The ineptness of many local authorities, you know, it makes me say, come on, why are you paying all those top staff all that money when actually the services in the front line are so poor?
Yes.
That we need to look at actually what is being delivered. And where are our biggest pensions? It's local government workers or health workers and councils. And that is costing us all a fortune. But so will the increase in the insurance that they've increased for every employer.
Well, you the national insurance, you make a lot of really, really good points there, Anne. And you've called this programme a number of times over the course of the year, and you always make good points, Anne. And I just want to say thank you for those calls. Have you got a nice Christmas lined up yourself, Anne?
Oh yes, I have. From a child in care with nobody, I have a large family.
Lovely.
And that was good, but I was also as happy working with the homeless on Christmas Day. I'd never be bored.
Wonderful stuff, Anne. You're a great person. Thank you very much indeed. That's Anne in Sussex, who one of our regular callers who gives us some really, really good thoughts throughout the year, and I know many other people do as well. So thank you to everybody. I will be back, I should say, on the 30th. I'm going to be here. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere for the next 17 minutes, but I will be back on the 30th, Monday the 30th. I'll be doing Drive all week, the week after Christmas. But yes, I'm heading off to Northern Ireland, and I'm delighted that, we think about Christmas's past, we think of Christmas's present, we think of Christmas's future, and really the ghost of Christmas past is with us today. Tech Up Dave is in the studio wearing a hideous Santa shirt. Hello, sir. Are you? And a hat. Tell us about the hat.
You can't be rude about the shirt. The shirt was bought by my daughter.
Well, you always make that excuse, but I think
it's great as well. What's this?
So the hat actually, that's amazing. I'm going to put my own hat on. So you've got the wiggly ears. That's brilliant. Well, listen, I'm going to put my own Christmas hat on as we
that looks lovely.
Discuss some Christmas stories, because tell us about the man who built a 30-foot yacht in his back garden for Christmas. I actually don't even know if it's a man. I'm just assuming it's a man.
It is a man.
Who built a 30-foot yacht.
A guy called Ian, who was 82 years old and was a sailor and loved doing bits and pieces. And he even had a little model boat that he sailed in the garden.
Right.
And unfortunately, he got a cancer diagnosis, and so rather than get down in the dumps, build a boat. He's always liked model boats.
He spent the last 12 months handcrafting a 30-foot yacht in his Bearston back... Is that how you remember it? Bearston?
I think so,
Bearston back garden, with the hope it will bring joy and make people happy for the festive period. The boat and its 33-foot mast are decorated with hundreds of Christmas lights, which can be seen by those passing by. Well, he's
and probably lots of people in the near local area,
presumably from space as well. Yes, my goodness.
Yes, so that's quite good.
But actually, there is a bit of pressure on parents for an Instagram-worthy Christmas as well, and making sure that all the you're seen to be having a good time, and that is the pressure a lot of people have, isn't it?
Gone are the days of sitting there circling things in the catalogue, going, I want that,
yes.
Which is what I did when I was a kid. Now you get
the Argos catalogue, the laminated book of dreams.
Now you get an email from your child with a load of hyperlinks in it, which they've found on TikTok of things that
which you then forward to Santa Claus,
which then have to be forwarded to Santa Claus
and the elves. Yes.
But even worse for that, some of the boys this year have been asking for advent calendars that were 25 quid.
25 quid for an advent calendar?
Yes.
That's more than £2 a month.
I know.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. I remember having an advent calendar where you open the door and the most exciting thing was a picture.
Yeah.
They didn't put chocolate in advent calendars when I was young.
When I were a lad, you had to walk 3 miles to school in the snow. You had a friend who had a piece of rope to play with. He was middle class. Right. Speaking of Christmas presents.
Christmas presents. Well, we've got you a little present, which we know you're a fan of cats.
Yes. Am I a fan of this, though?
I'm not really sure whether you're going to... It's allegedly a Christmas tree decoration.
Would it be fair to say this is in some ways a novelty present?
It could well be.
I don't want to insult you in any way, but it's kind of scary. It's a ceramic cat.
Yes. So, happy Christmas.
Than't you very much, I think. I've put this on...
Jack will love it.
I put this on Twitter for a picture of Dave with this. I would argue, a slightly sinister-looking cat there with a wreath. I'm not sure quite what it's looking at, but I mean, all I can say is thank you, I think.
Excellent. Yes.
Goodness me. Well, yes, that's
Merry Christmas.
Yes, Merry Christmas to you too, Dave. I have given Dave presents, but they were yesterday and off screen because I don't feel the need to ostentatiously show my generosity. Tell us about the cat. The cat who got stuck up a drain pipe. We couldn't have a chat with you, Dave, without talking about cats, of course.
A female black cat called John.
John the female cat, yeah.
Was found with its head poking through one end of a pipe that was connected to a garage down in North Somerset.
Right.
And so firefighters had to be called
to
remove John from the pipe. And in the end, what they had to do was chop the pipe off, leaving Johnny in the little bit of the
pipe itself. Yeah.
And then off to the vet he went, and it's okay, everything's fine.
Vets for Pets Clevedon said in a statement shared by the fire station that John, the female cat, was cuddled and pampered before being reunited with her relieved owner. I was given oxygen therapy and sedated while the pipe was removed by the fire brigade. My goodness.
There we go.
Well done. I'm going to take this opportunity to say thank you, Tech Up Dave, and thank you to everybody who works on the programme as well. I'm also going to, self-indulgently, as I try not to, but I am going to read out 3 nice messages. Shall I read them out?
Oh, go on then.
Simon in Portsmouth says, in the studio bright with holiday cheer, Peter Cardwell's on air, spreading joy far and near. Talk's the place where the magic unfolds with stories and laughter and warm tales retold. Enjoy going home, says Simon in Portsmouth. Isn't that lovely? And thank you to Alice in Belfast, which is very close to where my parents live, about 30 miles away. Hi Peter, I hope you and your family have a great Christmas. Going to miss you. And Kevin and Mike just have to have a few extra drinks over Christmas, given that you'll be away. You never seem to get good weather when you're going home. Hope you don't have delays. Great show. I'm sure Jack got loads of prezzies. Santa broke the bank for my wee Garfield, says Alice. Well, I hope Garfield had a wonderful Christmas. And Penny has been in touch again. Says, you are Peter the Great. What a brilliant presenter you are. Thank you for your empathy, kindness and genuine caring for us, your listeners for such a long time, and the many topics you have talked about. Please don't ever leave. Wishing you and yours a very Merry Christmas and a happy and healthy New Year. Keep safe. Love, Penny in Essex. Penny, thank you. That's very touching. And a very happy Christmas and New Year to you, Dave. You've got a new hat on now, which is a reindeer.
Yes.
You really have quite an extensive collection of these.
I've got a huge bag, which I always get requested by Mr. Bull to bring in.
Excellent. Well, he is back tomorrow at 6 o'clock with The Breakfast Show. Dave, happy Christmas. We're going to talk to, as we have been doing over the last little while, a couple of small businesses to remind ourselves, just as Christmas comes near, it's not just about the big online retailers, it's about supporting local businesses. And Small Business Saturday a couple of weeks ago, we had a huge reaction. 2 more businesses, the last 2 of the year, and we'll hear from them. And we will check in with Mark in Lincolnshire to see if my Christmas card arrived. Stay with us here on Talk.
If you watch the abysmal proceedings by the Public Accounts Committee yesterday, you saw all these people who've wasted not the figure you did, but nearer 100 billion, stand there having lied to successive Public Accounts Committees over the years and saying, oh, we're going to reset it, and from now on, we who have messed it up are going to make it all right again. I mean, I've never seen anything more ridiculous in my life.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, you might remember a few weeks ago it was Small Business Saturday. We had loads of people saying they wanted to hear more from small businesses, loads of small businesses who got in touch, over 20 of them actually, and we've decided today's the last day, but we're just going to profile a couple of them, really encouraging people to get out there, support businesses in your community, and to make sure that you shop locally, especially these last few days. You know, it's probably too late for a lot of the online retailers as well anyway, so get out there on your high street and support people. So we'll talk first to Sanjay Agarwal, who's Chief Spice Officer at the Spice Kitchen. Sanjay, tell us a little bit about Spice Kitchen.
Brilliant. No, thank you for having me. So yeah, as I said, my name's Sanjay Agarwal. I'm actually the co-founder of Spice Kitchen. We're a company based in Liverpool. We make amazing spice blends, but we actually make these wonderful gifts of spices. You can see that, and it's an Indian spice box with all the spices in. And my amazing mum, who I founded the business for, actually makes these gift wraps.
Oh, lovely. Your mum makes those. I'll just say to people who are listening on the radio that is a very intricate and very beautiful spice box there. So your mother makes those and you market them and sell them.
Exactly, yeah. So we make the amazing blends and we put together these beautiful sets of spices essentially with gift wraps, as well as selling spiced hot chocolates and spiced chocolate bars and a variety of amazing products.
Marvellous. Well, Sanjay, all the very best. I hope it has a really good Christmas for you, and thanks for contacting us as well as Sanjay Agarwal, who's Chief Spice Officer at Spice Kitchen. One more, and that is Nicole Bateman, who's co-founder of the Super Sensory Squad. This is a bit different. Tell us a little about the Super Sensory Squad and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So we go from cats to penguins. So we've got 8 penguin characters that link to the 8 sensory systems to help especially neurodivergent kids understand their sensory needs so that they can feel more emotionally regulated and better for their mental health. So yeah, we have books, we have toys, and we have courses to help parents understand too.
Marvellous. That is a really good idea. Now, how long have you had the business and whereabouts do you work, Nicole?
So it's myself and my business partner, Kate Grayson, who's an occupational therapist, and we've run it for 18 months now. I'm down in Bournemouth and she's down up in Newcastle. So we work online and, we met through Mums in Business networking.
Wonderful. Well, very well done to you, and very Merry Christmas, and thanks for profiling your business. That's Nicole Bateman there. She's the co-founder of the Super Sensory Squad. We also heard from Sanjay Agarwal, Chief Spice Officer at Spice Kitchen. As the final thing that I do before Christmas, I want to talk to Mark in Lincolnshire, and I just want to remind ourselves of what Mark told me last week. Let's just remind ourselves of that.
I mean, it's I think my 7th year on my own now. I've been housebound for about 2 years, aged 50,
okay.
which has been great fun anyway. So it's not like I can get out to do anything else anyway, even if I wanted to. I mean, I don't really mind too much. I can understand why a lot of people get really upset this time of year. Yeah. Whether it's more the religious side of it that gets me through that, I don't know. I assume it probably is. I mean, for me, I think if there's anything that does kind of get to me a little bit, it's more the fact, like I said I can never think of his name, the guy that answered the phone originally. Tommy. Tommy. It's more the side of things where you have, like for, I don't know now, 2, 3, 4 years now, there's no Christmas cards, there's no presents, there's none of that.
Do you not get any Christmas cards, Mark?
No, not had a Christmas card for about 3 years.
Well, I decided to send Mark a Christmas card, and a few other people as well. Mark, you're very welcome back to the programme. Has my Christmas card arrived? Has it actually got through the maelstrom of the postal system?
Hi there, Peter.
Hiya.
Hi there. No, it hasn't.
Well, you were telling me on DMs last night on Twitter that you've got a note from the Royal Mail saying a package has arrived, so hopefully you'll get that soon.
Hopefully it does turn up, yeah. I mean, it's only a couple of days, isn't there, really? So
yeah, it'll hopefully arrive tomorrow anyway, Mark. But listen, we've had quite a reaction to your call, and you really didn't sound... You weren't feeling sorry for yourself at all, Mark. You certainly were just being very factual and giving great insight, as you often do when you give us a call. I wonder just how important you believe the religious side of Christmas is this year, especially for people like yourself who will be on their own on Wednesday.
I think it's, as I said last week, it's quite important for me. It's not that I'm some kind of, the classic Bible basher, that kind of guy. I'm not really that. But religion does play a part for me because I always feel, since I reconnected with the Lord, if you like, He always feels with me. I never feel truly alone. Whenever whenever I do get little bits of, darkness or whatever in me where I feel a bit down in the dumps and things about the situation, I think it's always that brightens me up. And it's just remembering, for me, the sacrifices that he made, that he came here to essentially save us. He admonishes us of our sins by taking our sins. And, the whole, as everybody knows, that's why he died on the cross.
Yeah. And you've reminded us, Mark, of the true meaning of Christmas and the reason. You know, Jesus is the reason for the season. Many Christians say, I'm agnostic, hopeless agnostic, but this is the point. This is why we have Christmas. Mark, I just want to wish you, I hope that package arrives tomorrow. I know you've got a little note about it. And I just want to wish you a very, very happy Christmas and keep in touch in 2025.
Indeed, you too, Peter. Have a nice Christmas back in Northern Ireland, and best of love to Jack as well.